ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their navy. Some pretty harsh words that he's going all in on this. Doesn't it sound that way, Olivia?
It does, and it's hard to say at this very early stage whether that is an achievable objective. I'll defer to Charlie and the military experts who know what the U.S. and Israel are positioned to do, but those are ambitious targets for the U.S. to want to pursue all at once. Obviously, the regime is going to want to retaliate. I think we've gotten an indication of that from Iranian officials in the region, and unless there is a sound decapitation of its leadership from the supreme leader on down, senior officials in the IRGC and the Basij, this is a regime that has dug in before, and this is a regime that has made clear that its primary goal is survival, and that is the reason that it has for a long time sought to portray itself as a threshold nuclear state, to stockpile as many missiles and build as many missile launchers as possible. But there's a very real known shortage of interceptors at the moment. So the likelihood that this campaign can be sustained beyond 8 to 10 days, according to officials we've been speaking with, is pretty low. So it remains to be seen just how big and how sweeping the campaign that the U.S. and Israel appear to be engaging in right now together can go in further stages.
Yeah, he says we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or in the alternative, face certain death. So lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. He says that again. Now, this escalation, it just seems like, could this make it harder or impossible maybe to reach any kind of agreement at this point? What happens after this?
Any room for diplomacy if you're taking the president at his word and you see what accompanying military efforts he unleashes alongside Israel. As we had mentioned, there were supposed to have been technical talks taking place in Vienna involving the nuclear watchdog there. We were waiting for confirmation whether the U.S. was planning to participate. Iranian negotiators were there to continue discussing the nuclear portfolio amid signals from the mediators, the Omanis and others, that there was a real appetite to continue trying to find a peaceful solution, and using the argument that absent diplomacy, the multi-pronged issues here are not going to be resolved. It is far from clear whether those Monday talks continue to see if there can be a curtailment of the military campaign underway here. That was the word that we had as of late Friday, all very much an open question now as the attack has gotten underway.
Olivia, I'm going to go to Charlie in a second, but let me ask you really quickly. Let's talk about the global ramifications of a strike like this, the possibility perhaps of Russia or China getting involved. Can you touch on that a little bit for folks at home who may be concerned that this may turn into something much bigger?
Well, we do know that the Iranians had been engaging the Russians and the Chinese, soliciting their support militarily, diplomatically. It's unclear whether either power is going to lean in support because of exactly what you cite, which is a much broader global conflagration. I don't know that we are on the precipice of that now. There had been uneasiness on the part of U.S. allies in the region. The U.K. had apparently declined to let the U.S. use its bases to stage air power in the region. Gulf states were reluctant to allow U.S. overflight and use of their airspace for any offensive activity. So the U.S. was very much going it alone with Israel to begin with, notionally, before this actually got underway. And it is very much unclear if there are casualties, whether U.S. allies are going to come robustly to the U.S.'s defense. That's an open question. These are early stages. And just how broadly this goes depends now on how the Iranians respond and what the tit for tat looks like from there.
All right, you mentioned casualties. For this next question, I'm going to go back to Charlie. President Trump acknowledges the possibility of American casualties, Charlie. He says the lives of courageous American heroes may be lost and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now, but for the future. And it is a noble mission. That's what the president is saying. Charlie. I hear sirens in the background as well, Charlie.
Sorry, we're just having another siren. Yeah, it's okay for now. Do we have to go in? We're all right. We'll hold. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So I wasn't able to listen to everything that President Trump was saying there. It's a pretty exhaustive explanation about what's going to happen. He sets out a prolonged conflict with Iran. He's urging the Iranian military to lay down their arms, that they would be given some sort of amnesty to not fight back. Otherwise, they're going to face certain death. In addition to that, after he's told the people of Iran to get into a safe place, wait essentially for the dust to settle, because he's laying the groundwork for what sounds to be a prolonged bombing campaign in Iran, and then to come out and overthrow the government. So these are the strongest words that we would have heard. This is not a sort of symbolic first strike. It may be sending a message. Again, you just heard the sirens going off, which doesn't necessarily indicate that we have incoming, because we'll hear the air raid sirens as well, and they tend to be very specific and localized. But they have to expect that Iran's going to retaliate. But yes, this sort of level of reaching out, not a message just to the people of the United States, but to the people of Iran too, and obviously to the people of Israel. Now, when you talk about U.S. forces, you know, he would have been given a list of the counterattacks and the capabilities of Iran's forces and proxies within this region. Proxies have been severely denigrated over the past 2 years, partly with the help of Israel taking out, you know, the larger groups like sort of Hezbollah, but there are also Iranian-backed proxies throughout the Middle East, some known, some covert, that have frequently targeted U.S. Forces in the past. But if Iran is to launch, you know, their capacity and capability of the missiles, they have missiles that were within easy reach of U.S. forces, and not all of them can be intercepted. So I think this is just a sort of reality check that if this is going to be a prolonged war, that President Trump is warning Americans that they will be in the line of fire and they will be attacked, and this is the cost of war. So that all of those statements that I just made are a surprise and sort of laying out, because we had been anticipating, is it going to be limited strikes, is it going to be regime change? And it sounds from the language that President Trump is using that this is all in, telling the military to just lay down their arms, don't fight back, you'll face certain death, telling the people of Iran to get low, and when it's over, come and overthrow the government. This is regime change, and it's going to take a lot, and that's why when we talk about how much has been brought into this in terms of the military assets into this region, there's a lot. Mostly, and I keep underlining this fact, are the aerial assets, the fighter jets, the cruise missiles. These are offensive weapons, but there also will be defensive weapons in order to protect U.S. forces at bases here, and also the extraordinary amount of naval assets at sea.
Charlie D'Agata for us in Israel. Thank you so much for that. We also need to thank Olivia Gazis, who's been with us on this breaking news story from the Middle East. The U.S. and Israel launching what they're calling a preemptive strike against Iran. We understand, once again, this is a joint U.S. and Israeli strike, which hit in Iran's capital of Tehran, near the offices of Iran's supreme leader. It is being reported that Iran's supreme leader was not in Tehran at the time, was transferred to a secure location. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and CBS Saturday Morning. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Carissa Lawson in New York.
His perspective on it, of the various things he said the Iranian government had done to America, the various, whether it's from the storming of the embassy shortly after the revolution to the sinking of the USS Cole to the funding of militia in the Middle East. He listed a long list of grievances they had, and then basically went on to say what this action was going to achieve. And I think what was really interesting was the scope of those ambitions. This wasn't just trying to stop the nuclear program, as he'd said. This is destroying the ballistic missile, shattering their industry. He said to the Revolutionary Guard, lay down your weapons, surrender or you will die. I mean, it was very, very broad and very, very strong in its words from the US president.
And he also mentioned the fact that he said that there is a possibility of American soldiers, casualties, dying in this war. This is a very different message from a president who campaigned as an anti-war president.
Yeah, I think he knows that although the Americans and the Israelis have overwhelming firepower against the Iranians, that the Iranians have a huge number of ballistic missiles as well, and that US bases in the region are going to be vulnerable. So it's interesting, there's been talk about this build-up for a long time, and of the potential for war, but actually one of the things that analysts said and insiders said is that the reason that the US wouldn't do this 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago is because they didn't have the air defences in place. They do now have far more air defences in place. But even though they've got their Patriot missile systems, other defences around, they know that Iranian ballistic missiles will target their bases, will target maybe their allies, will certainly target Israel, and they know that not all of them will be stopped. And excuse me, I think he's preparing the US public for the idea that there will be casualties. I don't think he's not talking. It's important to emphasise that wasn't because American forces will be killed on the ground going into Iran. This is, I think, we're talking about missiles coming back and causing casualties that way.
Gia, your thoughts on the president's statement, as Joe mentioned there, talking about regime change essentially in Iran. How likely is that? How effective can the Americans and Israelis be in that?
Just before answering your question, if an hour ago you would have asked me about this attack, what is the ambition? I might have said, maybe this is just putting pressure on Iran to give more in the negotiation. But after his speech, it is very clear the message to security forces: choose between death or living. Security force, and also asking Iranian people, come out and finish the regime once for all. And I think what he says, it seems to me, is a long term. They have been preparing, they have been deploying hardware, military hardware, anti-aircraft, anti-missile defense system to the region. They have been preparing for this day, and all the sign was indicating they are preparing to attack Iran. But many people, just a few days ago, they were saying most likely this is for pressuring Iranian to give in more. But I think this is exactly what many Iranian among the opposition were hoping for. They were hoping for the President Trump go in, weaken the security forces, and pave the way for people to come out, just like a month ago, to rise up and finish the regime once for all. And actually, just a few minutes ago, one of the major Iranian opposition figure, Prince Reza Pahlavi, came out. He said the promise of President Trump to come to the aid of Iranian people, that moment has come. He has fulfilled his promise, and the time to change the regime is now. And I think all the signs indicating that it might have been planning for the regime change in Iran.
An update that we're getting from the Israeli army at the moment says it's identified missiles being launched from Iran. So this is the Israeli army saying it's identified missiles being launched from Iran. It had been preparing for some kind of retaliatory attack by Iran. Just give us a sense of Iran's capacity to respond militarily to this attack.
Well, Iranian, in the past few decades, they have been able to develop their ballistic missiles. Last year, during the June 12 days war, I was in Israel. I witnessed the sheer level of destruction of those missiles those missiles could penetrate through Israeli system, and numbers of them hit the ground, and the level of destruction was massive. Iranians say they have used supersonic missile, which is capable of passing through the defense system. And Iran also have a short-range missile, have a drone capacity, which Russian has used against Ukraine. Iranian give it to them, Shahid drones. And I think they have that kind of capacity. The question is whether Israel or American be able to attack the launching pad. That's exactly what Israel did last year. They were attacking the launching pad. From the moment those mobile launching pads were moving, they were attacking them, reducing the Iranian capacity to attack Israel, or possibly at this point of time, most likely U.S. bases also could be the target for Iranian security forces and Iranian missiles. And we know they have that capacity. In the past few days, the commander of Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the commander of Iranian army, they have threatened if United States start a war, we will respond with a force never seen before. But we have to wait to see exactly what kind of force, what kind of weapons they have in their hand they can confront American and Israelis at this point of time.
Yes, Joe, what do you make of that, considering the military presence already there in the region?
I think what Gia said is exactly right, but there's one other thing I think to add to that. It's really important to remember that the US, whilst it has these very sophisticated air defense systems, as does Israel, the number of interceptors they have is comparatively small compared to the huge number of ballistic missiles that the Iranians have. So while they have the capacity to defend themselves, they don't. Eventually their stocks of interceptor missiles will start to be degraded, probably faster than the Iranian ballistic missiles would run out if they don't destroy them on the ground. So that's going to be the really important thing for the Americans and the Israelis to be kind of aiming to do here, will be, as Gia says, to take out those launch pads, because if there is a sustained ballistic missile campaign from Iran, eventually they will start to get through with greater numbers, and the consequences of that could be very severe for the Americans and the Israelis.
Joe Inwood and Gia Gold, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest on that here in the studio. Well, let's go live to Doha now and speak to our correspondent there, Barbara Plett-Usher. And Barbara, Doha is one of those areas, Qatar, one of those countries that would be worried about any potential Iranian response.
Yes, especially because Qatar was the one Arab country that was hit during the 12-day war, because it hosts the biggest American air base in the region, the El Udeid military base, which is essentially the forward base or headquarters for the Central Command. It's the hub for all their big air operations in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, for their logistics. About 10,000 troops there, a lot of aircraft stationed there. Last time, Catherine, you'll remember that the Iranians targeted Al Udeid, but they signaled very much ahead of time that they were going to do so, and all of those missiles were shot out of the air. So it was kind of performative. It was sort of an indication or a message being sent, and they've made very clear this time that that's not going to be the case, that they are ready to strike U.S. military bases throughout the region, and there are 13 of them throughout the region, here in Qatar and Bahrain, in the UAE, in Iraq and Syria, and elsewhere as well. So they have said that they are ready to strike them directly without any forward warning. In fact, the Iranian officials had been saying, we made a mistake last time, actually. We were too slow, we were too careful. Now look what we're facing, and that's not going to happen again. Now, from satellite images we've seen over the last couple of days, it looks as if, especially in Bahrain, where you have the naval fleet, the 5th Naval Fleet there, and also here in Al Udeid, the aircraft and the ships have been moved out. The satellite images are showing that the areas are quite empty. We've also had reports that troops have been moved out as well, although we don't have concrete details on how many and to where. But this is quite critical for the administration, for the Trump administration, because polls have shown that the American public has a very low tolerance for American casualties. And definitely, if there are going to be American casualties, many of them would come from strikes on the military bases here. So the Americans, the administration has been shipping anti-aircraft defenses to these places, as well as we've talked many times about the military firepower that it has amassed in the Gulf. But still, President Trump did warn that Americans might die. He's gauging there whether the American public will be able to absorb that. And clearly his message, his long speech there, was to try to justify going back to all of America's grievances with Iran, actually, rather than focusing on why it might be necessary right now from a security point of view for the Americans to do this. signaling that they may be hearing about some casualties.
And Barbara, we'll continue to monitor the reaction in the region. We are looking at these flight radar images which show that the airspace across Iran and Iraq is closed at the moment. You mentioned there Iran's strike on Qatar last year, the fact that it was highly signaled, it was choreographed essentially. This time around, are those channels of communication open, do we know? And is there a sense that the region is in uncharted territory at the moment?
The last. The region is in uncharted territory at the moment. Now, certainly the regional leaders have done everything they could to keep those channels of communication open over the past 2 months. There's been enormous diplomatic activity, calls, many calls, visits to Iran, visits by Iranian officials to Qatar and other areas. The regional leaders speaking with the Americans, trying to tamp down the pressure, trying to find a way out of this. The most recently, of course, you had the Omani foreign minister, which has been mediating in these nuclear talks, taking a quick trip to the U.S. to meet with the vice president and saying, look, we actually do have a breakthrough in these talks. The Iranians have agreed that they would not keep any enriched uranium on their soil. They would move their stockpile immediately. That's a breakthrough. So they've been doing everything they can because they are worried about what might happen. They are aware that Iran is weakened. It's not as strong as it was a couple of years ago, but it does have a very large, still ballistic missile store, short and medium range missiles, which means that they are in range as well as Israel. They're worried beyond that. That if this was going to be perceived as an existential threat, which I think we can say quite confidently it will be, given what President Trump just said, that the Iranians might target not just the U.S. bases, but they might target directly oil and gas infrastructure, which is, of course, the lifeblood of the petrostates here, that they might close the Strait of Hormuz, which is this narrow waterway where much of the oil shipments go through. And so that has been something that's a great deal of concern. You've actually had, in recent days, seen countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates increase their oil shipments, their oil exports, presumably because they were worried that this might come to pass. We don't have any information about what sort of talks, what sort of channels might be open at this stage between, say, Qatar and other regional leaders with the Iranians. The supreme leader, as we've heard, is not in Tehran. He's gone into hiding again. It's not clear how accessible people are. We have a report from the semi-official Iranian news agency that thousands of Revolutionary Guards have been killed and wounded. So it sounds as if it might be a little bit difficult to organize communication on that level. But it is something that is they are watching very closely here. I would add, Catherine, that I mentioned that if there are American casualties, they would be at these bases. There are a lot of Americans in Qatar. There are close ties between Qatar and the United States. The Georgetown University, from whom you had a guest recently, he was in Qatar. That's the Georgetown, the Qatar branch of the university. I think there are thousands of them here. And the U.S. Embassy issued a statement saying it had urged all of its personnel to shelter in place, and that the American citizens should do the same. I'm not aware that it issued a warning mandating people to leave. There has not been a great deal of information about people being told that they needed to depart because of the imminent threats.
And Barbara, just looking at Iran's influence across the region, in Lebanon, in Yemen, what kind of conversations are people having about the potential unraveling of Iran's influence in the region?
Well, Iran's influence in the region has been unraveling, Catherine, since the beginning of the October War, because the Israelis have gone further out from their boundaries, and they have attacked Hezbollah, as you know, and very much weakened it with constant strikes, killing the leader as well. They have weakened Syria, Bashar al-Assad's regime was weakened to the extent that it fell. So the militias there, the Iranian-sponsored militias there, have been weakened. There are pro-Iran militias in Iraq, which have been keeping a low profile. in recent conflicts. They did not raise their heads during the 12-day war. They did, however, say that they would be prepared to get more active in this one if it should start, and that if it was existential, that is, if the supreme leader was targeted, that they would then for sure get involved. You've also had the Houthis. They have continued to send missiles towards Israel. I think that we could imagine that they will also perhaps become a part of the Iranian response to this strike, this attack on the country.
Barbara, thank you. That's our correspondent Barbara Plett-Asher in Doha there. Well, let's now speak to Ahmed Mahmoudian, Middle East analyst and research fellow at the University of South Florida's Global and National Security Institute. Thank you for joining us on BBC News. Just give us your sense of what you're making of the events over the last few hours.
Well, given to the scale of the attack and more specifically the places that they targeted in Tehran, which is largely in center, east, and also somewhat in the south of the Tehran, it seems that most of the attacks so far haven't been concentrated necessarily on military apparatus, but on the highest echelon of the Iranian political and intelligence leadership. Reports suggested that the presidential office been targeted, the office of supreme leader been targeted, the intelligence service itself been targeted. So, I mean, if we put this together with the President Trump's speech, this is going to be a regime change campaign. Neither the ballistic nor the nuclear project of Iran are not necessarily the priority of this attack. So far, the priority seems to be the very existence of the Islamic Republic as a political entity, which makes the nature of this war and its implication in the days ahead quite different from what happened or took place in the June war.
President Trump has been speaking, as you say there. This is different from what we saw last year, raising the prospect of regime change in Iran. How would that look? Because, of course, we had the example of Venezuela, where the Trump administration worked with a friendly leader who took over the government. How would that work in Iran, do you think?
It would be quite different, in my view. Maduro and Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, are not necessarily the same. So, Khamenei has been in charge of Iran for about more than 3 decades. The Iranian entire intelligence apparatus, its coercive apparatus, its IRGC's new generation, they have grown under his guidance, under his supervision. So the Iranian military and most of the political echelon of Iran, they are quite loyal to him. And, there have been various tests. Iran had the June war, and then Iran had the bloody war protest of the January, which thousands of the citizens being killed. But we haven't witnessed any sign that the Iranian military or law enforcement or, intelligence community are defecting or leaving the regime. They actually expedited and escalated their attempt to protect the regime. So I don't think so it's going to be quite unflawed like what happened in the Venezuela. The scenario that can be possible for the United States is basically, quote unquote, killing its way or targeting its way to more practical figures in the Islamic Republic. Not all the politicians within the Islamic Republic are necessarily as hardcore or principalist as Ayatollah Khamenei and his henchmen are. So President Trump may hope that by removing Ayatollah Khamenei and his circle, if he makes the decision, which seems to be because the area has been targeted is his office, he can get or lead the succession to at least more practical people in Iran, like the Ali Larijani or figures like him, and then make a deal with him. So it's not necessarily a campaign that would, assure or guarantee the toppling of the regime. But the Americans are hoping that if even the regime is not collapsed, the regime's behavior would change through the transformation of power from its hardcore element to much more practical figures.
But could you see a scenario where the security apparatus in Iran fragments, even though you might have someone within the IRGC taking over, they might not be able to control the different factions, militia groups in Iran if the Ayatollah was to be removed?
100%. I mean, that's a very good point and very good question. And so far, I haven't seen anybody touched on it. But how 100%? If the war continues, and if the United States military attacks and joined by Israelis on Iranian high command and control center continues, this will paralyze the decision making and, more importantly, communication within the IRGC and other sectors of the Iranian security system. Once you paralyze the high command and also the command and control system and the communication within the structure, you would evidently let people on the mid-level or even lower levels to have some level of autonomy. And that autonomy is not necessarily in accord, in correlation, and in alignment with other section of the our military or security. That can create chaos. That can create instability and lack of coherent movement from the Iranian security apparatus. So to answer your questions, 100%.
In the midst of this, we can't forget the mass protests that happened earlier this year, the brutal crackdown on demonstrators. We still don't know how many people were killed. It's estimated to be around 8,000 people that were killed in that crackdown. The conversation really has been remove the Iranian government, but then what follows? But then other people who say, well, this government has been so brutal to its own people that they will be happy for it to be removed. What's your assessment around that debate that's been happening?
Look, does the fall or collapse of the Islamic Republic make many Iranian happy? Yes, it does make many Iranian happy. We have a government in Iran which is corrupt, authoritarian, highly cleric. Its hands is diluted with the Iranian blood. It killed thousands of the people in the recent protests and hundreds before that through the execution and suppression of the protests. So I very much doubt that the fall of the regime would sadden a good or large portion of the Iranian people. But does that mean that these attacks or strikes lead to the people going on the street and seize the institution as the President Trump asked for it? Not necessarily. There are various things that the people in Iran would keep in mind when they want to make that move that the President Trump desires. First and foremost is their own safety. If the attacks between the Iran and United States and Israel continues to escalate, going on the streets while the Tehran is on a heavy bombardment is not going to be a feasible option for the Iranian public. The second consideration that they have, what would them going on the street make for the country? If the Iranian security and military apparatus collapses, given to Iran's neighborhood, given to Iran's demography, given to the fact that Iran has Afghanistan and its eastern border, there is a great chance the country falls into the security vacuum and through then to the total instability. I'm not saying that this is 100%, but it is among possibility. If this possibility arises, there would be a huge calculation and dilemma among the Iranian public. Should I go on the street and fuel the further instability that can cost me my life, or I should stand by to figure out what can happen, which will give the regime a chance to regroup and mobilize its forces and recontrol the country.
We haven't spoken yet about Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Iranian Shah. He's been talking to the Trump administration. Do you see him as a potential figure in any kind of transition, if we get to that point, transition in Iran?
This is a good question, and to be frank, very hard question to answer. Prince Reza Pahlavi has proved himself to be the most reputable and most famous and most influential figure among the Iranian opposition outside of the country. So if we go through the Iranian opposition outside of the country, no other figure has so far his power, his influence, and it seems that in a protest inside the Iran in January, one of the things that we've witnessed, that there have been quite a bit of the slogans in his favor. And we haven't heard the similar thing about other figures. So he is one of the top candidate or the top candidate. But does that mean that he is capable or has the ability to assume power in Iran? It's a different story. Reza Pahlavi, despite the popularity that he has among some of the Iranians, specifically speaking diaspora, he wasn't able to establish a network in Iran. We haven't seen it so far that he has an established network and a leadership or party among the inside Iran. This is the difference that he has with Ayatollah Khomeini, who the founding father of the 1979 revolution. Khomeini was himself in France in exile at the time of revolution, but he had many strong men inside the Iran, like the Taleghani and Hashemi and so on, to run the show and the theater inside the Iran. And once the Shah left the country, they grasped the power and provided him with the opportunity to come Iran and take over. We haven't seen any signal so far that Reza Pahlavi has such an exposed network. One can make a case that he has a covert network. He has people inside the Iran, but they have decided to so far hide, to do not come out because of their safety, which is a reasonable concern. And once the regime has collapsed, they would arise, they will show themselves. That's a very good possibility. But only time can tell us if it is the case or if it is not.
Aman Mahmoudian from the University of South Florida's Global and National Security Institute. Thank you for joining us on BBC News. Just to bring you some updates, we've heard from the Pentagon that they've given this operation the code name Operation Epic Fury. So that's what the Pentagon is calling this US-Israeli operation against Iran. We've also been hearing from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He addressed Israel saying the time has come for all segments of the Iranian people to throw off the yoke of tyranny and bring about a free and peaceful Iran. Well, let's bring in Jia Gore from BBC Persian. He's been following developments with me here in the studio. What do you make of what the Israeli government has had to say there, following on from what we've heard from President Trump, asking Iranians to rise up?
I think all the sign indicates, particularly what we have heard from Israel and what we have heard from President Trump, it seems this has been well planned, and it won't finish anytime soon. Because, as I said just an hour ago, if you would have asked me what is the purpose of this attack, I might have said maybe they want to put pressure on Iran in the negotiation to give up more. But it seems what President Trump said, it was clearly a declaration of war on Iranian and called on Iranian security forces and Islamic and Iranian Revolutionary Guards to choose between death and life. And obviously he said, leave the government, defect, and also called on people to go to the shelter. There will be a massive bombing in the coming days. And when we are done, you can come out and finish the government, finish the regime once for all. It seems he is clearly supporting the regime change in Iran. And in the past couple of hours, the footage we are hearing is, it seems to me, for example, the Pasteur Street is where the government and many security forces are located. The president, just a minute ago, the chief of staff of the Iranian president, in a tweet, he said the president is healthy and he's alive. Nothing has happened to him. Obviously, there was a rumor he may have been killed or he may have been hit. And also, we saw videos, clearly, people in Tehran, they were saying the office of the supreme leader has been flattened, has been destroyed, has been attacked. And even we hear some joyful chanting there because many people are not happy. As your guest said, many people are not happy with the situation in the country. The economy is crippling. Iran is isolated. And also, just more than a month ago, some estimate, President Trump say Iranian security forces have killed 32,000 people. And human rights activists and human rights organizations have identified the names of more than 8,000 protesters who have been killed. That's why many people in Iran, they don't have any sympathy for the government. Many people around the world, they might be surprised why people supporting or wanting a foreign country to attack. And obviously there is a massive divide between the government and majority of people on the street.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The last time the US and Israel attacked Iran, there was a rallying around the flag sort of sentiment, I believe, people who were opposed to that military action. This one comes after those protests were brutally brought down by the government. What's your feeling about how people might react this time around?
We know during the war, normally many people run for safety. Many people, even last year, they left Tehran, they went to other cities to make sure they wouldn't be hurt. And there was a mixed feeling last year. Some people say a foreign country have attacked us. And I mean, I wouldn't say they really supported the government, but mass majority of them, they stayed at home or left. They didn't come to the street. What Israel were hoping people come to the street and rise up. But we have to wait and see. And what happened this year, it is absolutely unprecedented. In the past 45, 50 days, we have seen every single day footage coming out from the families commemorating their loved one. Universities commemorating their classmates who have been killed in the protests. Young, most of them, young people, women and men have been gunned down during the protests. That's why so many people are angry with the system. And if you listen to those parents who commemorate their loved one openly, without fear, criticizing the regime, they say they would not give up. They will continue until the regime fall. And I think most likely Israeli and American intelligence service, they know what's going on inside Iran. They know the regime is very vulnerable. I think what I was reading between the lines President Trump was saying, it seems to me in the end, we do not expect a large scale of American troops go to Iran, to boots on the ground. But it seems to me with the kind of hardware and the aircraft carrier going to the region and all those air power Israel and the United States has, they might trying to weaken Iranian security forces, hitting Iranian leadership, military and also political leaders, in hopes of creating an environment for Iranian people without fear come to the street and in the regime. That's exactly what President Trump was calling today in his speech.
Gia, I don't want to step too far ahead because we do not know how things are going to pan out in the next few weeks, in the next few hours. But if, as the Americans and Israelis are now discussing a change in government in Iran, you know, the opposition has been working for years to try and bring about a change in the country. Just talk to us about what people will be saying, who will be working with who, and how would Iranians want to take ownership of a moment like this?
Well, we know, as you said, there has been a long struggle, more than 4 decades, against Islamic Republic of Iran by opposition. There are a few prominent figures, and many of them are in the prison inside the country, and also obviously outside of the country. The son of the former Shah, the King of Iran, Prince Reza Pahlavi, his name was chanted in the last protest in most of the cities. And also, don't forget, Iran is a very diverse country. You have Turks, you have Kurds, you have Baluch. For example, in the Kurdish region also, there are a formidable political party who are armed. They are based in Iraqi Kurdistan and waiting for the situation. If the security forces' ability degrade, I know for a fact that they might move in. And I think that's something possibly Israel and American are hoping for. That's why just a few minutes ago, I was hearing a report that the security forces in Kerman, one of the cities in south of Iran, has been hit. If they hit the riot police, if they hit the security forces, degrading the ability of that, it might create that environment for what Israel and American are hoping for. But what we know is, obviously, whenever the Islamic Republic of Iran, whenever they feel their existence is in danger, they do not hesitate to shoot. That's what they have done so far. And we know there are tens of thousands of security forces who are still loyal to government. We haven't seen much defection from them. We have to wait and see whether how many of those people who are in the security forces, they say, you know what, the end is coming, it's the right time for us to save ourselves and our families and leave the regime. So far, we have not seen that.
And just talk to us about how the government will be reacting in Iran. We heard from the Israeli army saying that they had detected missiles being launched from Iran towards Israel. You have the IRGC, you have the president, Pezeshkian, you have the Ayatollah. Just give us a sense of how the elites in Iran will be reacting to this.
Obviously, what we have been hearing from Iranian officials. So far, we haven't heard anything from the Supreme Leader or President Pezeshkian. As I said a minute ago, his deputy, the chief of staff, he said he's alive and he's safe, and condemned the Zionist attack on Iran. And in the past few days, and also military commanders have warning, if you attack Iran this time around, you will face a force never seen before. Iran has a capability with the ballistic missile and also drones. But the question is how much Iranian are able to using those weapons in their hands. I mean, we know for fact the videos we have seen, Iran's Supreme Leader office has been attacked. We know they were expecting Iran might be attacked. Most definitely, they have removed him from there. He must be in a safe place. It's the question whether Israeli or American know about his whereabouts. But also the President Pezeshkian, as I said, in Pastor Street, which the presidential office is based there, also has been attacked. That's why the deputy said he's safe. We know in the last year, Israel attacked Iranian national security, which the head of judiciary, the head of the Iranian parliament and also president was there. He was injured himself, but he escaped death miraculously. What we are seeing, it seems to me, Israeli and American trying to hit the command center. They're trying to decapitate Iranian leadership in hopes of creating a situation for Iranian to rise up. But again, so far it's in early hours, and what we are hearing from what we heard from President Trump, it seems to me the attack will continue in the coming days.
Gia Gol from BBC Persian, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us there. Well, let's now speak to our correspondent in Washington, David Willis. And David, we've been hearing extensively from President Trump already. Just give us a sense of the messaging from the American government following the start of this operation.
Yes, it was a video address from his Mar-a-Lago, Florida, Palm Beach home, Catherine, and a very defiant message from the commander-in-chief. He talked about bringing about regime change, urging the people of Iran to rise up, saying that this was their best opportunity in generations. He called on members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their weapons or face certain death, and he described the Iranian regime as one that could never be allowed to access or develop nuclear weapons. And that address, as I say, from his home in Palm Beach, coming just hours after the president told a crowd in Corpus Christi, Texas, that he had a difficult decision to make, as he put it. Well, we now know the way that decision has gone. And of course, it will be interesting to see if, and the president prepared the American people for the possibility of a prolonged conflict. And as I say, also warned them of the possibility of American casualties. It's an element of war, he said. So it does remain to be seen how long this conflict will go on, what sort of retaliation Iran might now decide to meter out. And of course, that could all depend on what was targeted in these joint strikes by Israel and the United States. Were they looking to bring about regime change with these strikes? As I say, the retaliation, the level of retaliation could very much depend on what has been hit and who has been hit.
Have we had much reaction to this in the US? Of course, it's the middle of the night there. But what are Americans likely to make of this, including the president's own base, who are America First Americans who are anti-war?
Yes, although there are critics even within Donald Trump's own party, of course. Congressman Thomas Massie, who has been a critic of Donald Trump, said, posting on social media, act of war unauthorized by Congress. That was how he characterized what has taken place in Iran tonight, or in the early hours of this morning there. And of course, this is a president who criticized one of his Republican predecessors, George W. Bush, for getting bogged down with the long conflict in Iraq. So there will be those who I think will be uneasy about this, particularly given that President Trump was saying on the election campaign that he was looking to end wars rather than start new ones.
David Willis, thank you. Well, let's now speak to Israeli political analyst Ori Goldberg, who joins us live from Tel Aviv. And Ori, I believe that you are in a bomb shelter at the moment. Just give us a sense of what's happening around you.
Well, fortunately, we've been let out of the bomb shelter. Apparently, we're supposed to stay in the near vicinity so we can enter it when we are instructed to do so. And the atmosphere appears to be resigned. Our politicians have already made it clear that no sort of critical political discourse is allowed at this stage. The head of the parliamentary opposition has declared that there is no coalition or opposition. And I would say, I think safely, that most Israeli Jews see themselves as very much in support of Israel's government and Israel's attacks in Iran.
What do Israelis make of this operation? You said they would be in support of it, but if you're talking about an operation that could bring about regime change, Israel might need to be prepared to be responsible for what happens in Iran in the coming years. Is that part of any of the conversation there?
Oh, nobody here thinks further than the tip of their nose at this point. And I doubt they would think beyond that very short distance otherwise. Israelis don't really care. This operation is very useful for Israel's current leadership in terms of securing its political future, this leadership's political future, because it cements their presence, particularly Prime Minister Netanyahu's in office, as inevitable. And again, most Israelis have had it drummed into their brains for at least 2 decades that Iran is Israel's archenemy and existential threat, despite, by the way, being told the opposite by Israel's intelligence and military leadership. And the fact that this operation is ongoing now, that these strikes are ongoing, seems to validate that foregone and yet again inevitable conclusion. So no Israelis are thinking about the implications of this, not just for Iranians, but for Israelis as well. Israel got hammered last June. No Israelis appear to see any problem with this happening again, perhaps in an even more egregious way.
And Ori, you mentioned there, you say from your perspective that this operation is for the benefit of the leadership in Israel at the moment. But this was also a good opportunity for them in some regards, because Iran is relatively weak at the moment. You have a US president who is willing to carry out military action like this. And this is something that the Israeli leadership has called for many years, for the current Iranian government to be brought down.
Well, with all due respect to President Trump and to Prime Minister Netanyahu, neither of them has appeared to be particularly coherent or intelligible this morning. President Trump spoke about everything and every option, but was very careful to emphasize that he was defending the American people, a notion, by the way, that most Americans, including members of his own party, reject. Prime Minister Netanyahu followed suit, claimed that this was an operation aimed at regime change, that they were creating an opportunity for the Iranian people to take their future into their hands. The notions of regime change were also voiced last time around in June. They were proven to be completely baseless and empty. Israel was not attempting regime change then. I would go as far as saying that I doubt Israel is attempting anything like regime change now. What Israel is doing is embarking on the offensive yet again, just as Israel has done over the past 2.5 years repeatedly whenever it has failed in one of its military endeavors. So I doubt that this is a strategic venture that was indeed planned for months and years in order to topple the Iranian regime. I think that before long, Donald Trump's patrons in the Middle East will make him see that he is doing nothing for the stability of the region or for his own regime, for that matter. And I doubt very much whether Israel is obligated in any way to the future of the Iranian people. Israel needs a war to get at least one win, because it appears to be losing all other wars.
But can you not see the benefits for Israeli security? The Islamic Republic, the current Iranian government has supported a lot of groups in the region that have targeted Israel, including Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah. So potentially, if that regime was to be removed, it would change a lot of dynamics for Israel in the region.
Oh, very true, but nobody is assured in any way that this regime, that the Islamic Republic will indeed be removed. And the instability that would be created in Iran, which is potentially a much more serious agent of chaos when it is engulfed in domestic chaos, that potential is very much there. I doubt anyone in the region is seriously committed to a long-term campaign for regime change. The fact that this started doesn't mean that anyone knows how it will end. Saying that this is about bringing down the Islamic Republic is the easiest thing in the world. Maybe there are strikes that are being carried out against prominent leadership institutions in Iran, perhaps even against the supreme leader himself. But then again, all options have also been mentioned. President Trump talked about the nuclear option. He didn't talk about the ballistic missile program. Israel's prime minister is all about a historical hour in which the regime can be toppled, but he says absolutely nothing about the specific goals of the strike. This sort of sweeping rhetoric does not last for long. War gets bogged down in the details. The fact that the United States and Israel have aerial supremacy over Iran, the fact that they can attack by land, from the air and from the sea does not mean that they have the capacity to occupy Iran or even the desire to occupy Iran, which may be what is needed to physically bring down the Islamic Republic. So we have absolutely no idea what's going on right now. I've listened to various people that you've had on in the past hour. Many have said that so much is going on behind the scenes. Whatever is going on behind the scenes does not change the fact that once wars begin, you have absolutely no way of knowing when or how they'll be finished. I think that's exactly the state of affairs at the moment. Israel needed to appear on the offensive. Trump needed this drastically, desperately, in order to draw attention from his regime's various failures. The fact that the interests of the United States and Israel happen to converge on this moment in Iran in no way means that this is a strategic operation aiming to change the strategic reality in the Middle East.
Ori Goldberg, Israeli political analyst, joining us from Tel Aviv there. Thank you for sharing your analysis with us here on BBC News.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's take a moment to listen to what President Trump had to say about the ongoing military operation against Iran.
The United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels and international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms, You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Samantha Simmons. You're watching BBC News with continuous coverage of our breaking news this hour. The United States and Israel are launching airstrikes across Iran. In a video posted on Truth Social, President Trump says they have launched major combat operations against Iran. He says the objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. He says Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and he accuses the Republic of trying to rebuild its nuclear program. President Trump has also said there may be American casualties as a result of the operation dubbed Epic Fury by the Pentagon. In a video statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the attack is to remove an existential threat to his country. US officials say the strikes are being launched by air and by sea in a multi-day operation. Israel's Defense Minister Katz has declared a special and permanent state of emergency in all areas of Israel and closed the country's airspace and all schools. Israeli defense forces warn they have identified missiles being launched by Iran towards Israel, and their defense systems are trying to intercept them. The combat operation has reportedly been planned for months. The strikes are across multiple locations. Smoke can be seen coming from buildings in Tehran, and people have reportedly been running away in panic. Media reports say blasts have been heard in Isfahan, Karaj, Kermanshah and Tabriz. Mehrabad Airport just outside Tehran has also come under attack. An Iranian official told the Reuters news agency that Tehran's retaliation and the response will be crushing. Iran's supreme leader Khamenei is reportedly not in Tehran, and Iran's president is described as safe. But 7 missiles have hit the presidential palace, and there have been strikes around the supreme leader's compound. The attack follows weeks of tension in the region, with US forces massing around Iran. Let's speak to our correspondent, John Donison, who is in Israel. Welcome to you, John. A joint Israel-US operation. Israel Defense Minister has called this a preemptive attack. How wide-ranging is it expected to be, do you think?
Well, let me just tell you first of all about the Iranian retaliation, which has clearly begun just in the last 20 minutes or so. We've had the sirens going off and explosions directly overhead where we are in East Jerusalem. I looked up to see what appeared to be some sort of projectile being shot down by Israel's missile defense shield. Further to the west on the coast in the cities of Haifa and Tel Aviv, there are reports of explosions there. So the Iranians have said their retaliation will be crushing, and it has clearly begun. Now, when you listen to President Trump in that 8-minute video address, this does not sound like a limited operation. What they're looking for, according to President Trump, at the end of this is regime change. He wants the Iranian people to rise up and seize their government in a once-in-a-generation opportunity, to paraphrase what he said. So we don't know how long this is going to go on for. We don't know specifically what has been targeted in Tehran so far, but it does look like it's going to go on for some time.
John, we're just going to bring in pictures from Haifa. We can see and trace the fire, it looks like, and sirens sounding. Let's just listen in. The sirens have just stopped, John, but the country now on a state of alert under an emergency protocol. When the attacks on Iran launched last summer in June, the 12-day war and the retaliatory response from Iran towards Israel. While Israel does have its defensive system there, Iron Dome, it is not impregnable, as they saw then, with dozens killed and hundreds wounded.
You're right, and it all depends how Iran retaliates. Its missile stockpile has been massively diminished during that conflict that lasted 12 days last year and in previous skirmishes, but it still does have considerable capability with ballistic missiles. And if it chooses to fire a large barrage of missiles at a city like Tel Aviv or Haifa, then it is inevitable, I think, that there will be casualties. Now, we're going to have to see how Iran calibrates its response. In previous exchanges between Israel and Iran, sometimes the response from Iran has been more measured. On one occasion, they sent over a fleet of drones, which took a long time to get here. Many of them were shot down. But I do think that if Iran wants to do damage, it does have the capability to do so. Of course, if it does, it can be guaranteed that Israel and the United States will hit back even harder.
John, after the attacks last year, the 12-day war with Iran, they were declared a success by President Trump, who said that Iran's nuclear capabilities had been wiped out. Clearly, they hadn't achieved everything. What has changed between now and then that the US and Israel have launched these attacks?
Well, you're absolutely right. When you listen to President Trump back then, the message they were saying was these were massive strikes, that they had obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions and capabilities. Now, that clearly isn't the case. You know, quite soon afterwards, you had Israeli intelligence coming out saying that they hadn't set back Iran's nuclear program significantly enough, and the pressure began to mount again for further action. Now, I was here in Jerusalem at the start of the year, the very start of January, and even then we were anticipating an Israeli and American strike against Iran. At the time, though, the Americans didn't have the military capabilities in the region to do what they wanted to do. But over recent weeks, they have been building up and building up to the extent that we've never seen such a show of American military power in the Middle East since the Iraq war back in 2003. So now they clearly feel they've got their pieces in place to do what they want to do. Just in the distance at the moment, I think I can hear explosions, likely Israel's missile defense shield taking out some sort of projectiles coming over. And it is going to be a nervous few hours, days, not just for here people in Israel, but of course in Iran as well, where people fear that this could mean an all-out war.
There has been a sense of almost resigned expectation, hasn't there, in Israel for many weeks, and a sense of preparedness, with schools being advised how to go back online, for example. Is there an overwhelming support for Prime Minister Netanyahu as he launches this attack, where it could be many days, if not weeks, of war?
I don't think you can say there's overwhelming support. I mean, this has been a very divided country over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of opposition from some sections of Israeli society to the war in Gaza, which went on for more than 2 years. They had the conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Perhaps there was more support for that. And you're right, you know, this is damaging. It will be damaging for the Israeli economy. We've just got the sirens again going off behind me now, signaling that some sort of projectiles are being fired over. You're right, schools are being closed. They closed the airspace. So people are wary of it, but they're used to it in this part of the world.
OK, John, for now, thank you very much. We'll let you go and seek shelter as well, of course. And this is the live shot of Jerusalem, where you can hear the sirens clearly sounding behind John there. There is now a state of emergency across Israel. We can speak now to Middle East security analyst Roger Shanahan, who joins us from Sydney as we continue to watch these pictures and events unfolding across Israel and Iran. Roger, welcome to you. What's your analysis of this operation? Why now? And what do you think President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are ultimately hoping to achieve? Is it going to be regime change?
Well, certainly that's what President Trump has indicated, that he's asking the Iranian people to rise up. And the target list, from what we're, from our understanding at the moment, is a range of military and political targets. Now, the obvious difficulty in that is trying to initiate regime change, A, in a country as large and as complex as Iran, and B, doing it solely in military terms through an air campaign. So that hasn't really happened in the past. So as part of the problem at the moment in understanding what the strategic intent is at the moment is that normally before people undertake military action, there's the ground is prepared and political leaders explain the rationale for why such a decision has been taken. But at the moment, we've had essentially a 4-minute clip from President Trump saying what he is doing and asking for the Iranian people to rise up. So we're still trying to work out what the intent of this campaign is at the moment.
President Trump has indicated that the threat from Iran could reach the US in terms of its missile capability, and that this is an operation that is very much also about protecting the American people. What's your analysis of that?
Well, I don't think when that claim was made previously, there's been a number of experts that poo-poo that idea, that really there's no evidentiary basis for that. And certainly there's no indication that Iran has any intent of doing that, let alone any capability to do it. I think he's been more forthright today when he said that they are looking to destroy naval and military capabilities in Iran and asking for the people to rise up. That's quite a risky proposition, and it's really interesting over the next couple of days to understand what the Iranian people are going to do. Obviously, when your country is attacked by the United States and Israel, the people might have a different reaction to that which you may have been briefed about. So it's quite uncertain territory in the next couple of 3 to 4 days, which is what we've been told might be the air campaign.
Roger, I just want to bring in some breaking news to our viewers now. The Reuters news agency is just reporting this breaking news that the Bahrain says their service centre of the US 5th Fleet has been subjected to a missile attack, according to the state news agency. This is coming from the Bahrain state news agency saying the service centre of the US 5th Fleet has been subject to an attack. And Roger, what's your analysis of that, given that President Trump had warned there may be US casualties? We certainly don't know if there has been at the moment, but also the number of US bases around the region.
Yeah, certainly. And this is always one of the risks of this kind of response. The US has moved a carrier battle group off the coast of Israel, and that provides significant air defense capability to Israel in the event that Iran is targeting Israeli targets, and has also moved air defense assets around the region, but you can't protect every asset all the time. And so if you're the Iranians, you're probably going to go to perhaps less well-defended US targets, and perhaps the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, perhaps US air bases in the UAE or Qatar. That might be the kind of target that the Iranians would select. It not only targets the United States, but also sends a message to Gulf Arab states that there's cost to be borne when the US undertakes military action against Iran. So it's a pretty complex situation at the moment.
It's an extremely complex situation. The Reuters news agency is also now reporting that sirens have sounded in Kuwait. And you mentioned Qatar, and of course the US is biggest military base is in Doha, and that was struck last year in the 12-day war, wasn't it? And some Qataris were actually killed in that. What risk is there of the moment of a wider conflict, of Gulf Arab states becoming embroiled in this? And to what extent will Donald Trump and the US military have engaged with those countries to, if not seek their approval, warn them of this?
Yeah, listen, I mean, that's a very good question. If you are the Iranians, as you said before, you understand that Israel is so heavily guarded that you might want to do a non-conventional approach to your response. So try to target US targets in the region. There are air bases in the UAE. There are air bases, US air bases in the UAE and in Qatar. There's US military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, which are less heavily defended than Israel. So if you can engage targets in those countries, there's a direct link between the US attack on Iran, but it also widens the response. And certainly the Gulf states, for a whole variety of reasons, don't want to be enveloped in an Iranian response. So if you're Iran, then you do envelop Gulf states in the response. Then they're going to start to look to the United States and start putting pressure onto them about what their strategic aims and goals are. So you might do less against Israel and more against Gulf Arab states that host US bases. As we said, you need to be very sure about what the response is going to be before you undertake such significant military action. So it's an unfolding story, but it could go in a number of directions.
Roger, at this stage, what's known about Iranian capabilities, military capabilities? Within hours last year, in June of the 12-day war, Israel had control over Iranian skies, and we know they certainly struck a lot of targets. But it's the ballistic missile capability in particular that Israel and the Arab states will be worried about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. As you pointed out, Israel and the United States have air supremacy, so really there's a very limited risk of aircraft being shot down over Iranian airspace or in other countries. But the issue is, how confident are you that you can degrade the Iranian missile capability to such a degree that it's ineffective? And part of the problem in the 12-day war was that Iran was still able to prosecute their campaign much longer than perhaps the planners in the United States and Israel had thought to start with. And I think that's probably going to be a feature of this air campaign for however long it works. And it'll be a different target set than the Iranians did in the 12-day war. They would have war gamed this post that conflict, and just as the United States and Israel would have. And they've come up with a different set of target lists, which perhaps we're seeing at the moment involving more Gulf states rather than using your capability against Israel, which is a much harder target.
OK, Middle East security analyst Roger Shanahan, thank you very much for being with us. Let's just show you the live pictures again in Haifa in Israel, where sirens are sounding and there is a state of emergency declared across the whole country. Many people have been seeking shelter in their bomb shelters. Most accommodation does have that across Israel, but now all of the government buildings are certainly shut. It is the Sabbath there, so schools are closed, many businesses are closed, and people are being urged to stay at home. Let's speak now to our BBC World Service correspondent Nafiseh Khanavard, who joins us live from Beirut in Lebanon. Welcome to you. Bring us up to date on what we understand is happening in Iran.
Samantha, it's early hours and people in Tehran started the day with hearing loud explosions. It happened when many people were outside. This is the beginning of the week in Iran, so it's the start of the week for people that going to work. Footage are very very powerful footage of explosions coming that showing that also there are casualties, and people are shocked. Those that have filmed these videos that we also verified them show them that people were shocked because it seems that they didn't expect that the attack will happen in this hour of the day, because usually because of the 12-day war that they experienced last summer, the attack started overnight. So it seems that they were all shocked, at least from the reaction that we see in those videos. People were shocked seeing that the bombs are landing on the streets and in main streets and main buildings, very strategic locations of Tehran. Explosions have been heard in Tabriz and other cities, including Shiraz. It is expected that soon probably internet will be cut, but this is as far as we could get from inside Iran. And we saw that Iran's national channel are playing very national anthem and music, asking people to stay calm and declaring that the war has started.
Yeah, and just within the past few days, Navise, the protests on the streets of Iran had restarted following last month's huge protests across the whole country in which many thousands of people were killed in a brutal crackdown.
Exactly, and in the past few days, we saw some protests in the universities between two sides, pro-regime and mainly anti-regime and pro-Mr. Pahlavi supporters in several major universities of Iran, especially in Tehran, which two sides were almost fighting each other. They burned Iran's flag, anti-regime ones, while the pro-regime ones were carrying Iran's official flag and threatening that they will take action against the other side. The other side were threatening that they will take action against the pro-regime ones. And now with we will see with Mr. Trump's call for people to stay home, but then take charge after the attack finish, we should see that if this is a call for the protest or not. Opposition leaders have not called specifically for people to come out right now. So it is not clear that these attacks will lead for another protest, because in 12 days war also we saw that people mainly took refuge, and rather than coming to the streets, they just took refuge or left major cities like Tehran. And it's expected that the same, at least for many, will happen because people need to save themselves. It's not clear where the bombs are landing, despite that it seems that targets are strategic targets. But we should not forget that these targets are in populated areas, including the residential office for the president, and also the house for the supreme, the main house for supreme leader. They are all in residential and highly packed areas in Tehran.
Nafise, thank you very much. Let me just bring you some updates coming into us on the news agency. The Reuters news agency is reporting Qatar's defence ministry saying it's downed all missiles targeting the country, according to the state news agency. So clearly, Iran is targeting Qatar. It's also, we understand, targeting perhaps Kuwait, where sirens have sounded, we understand, according to Reuters, and also Bahrain, where a US base in Bahrain has been hit in a missile attack, according to a Bahrainian statement there. Well, let's speak to Lise Doucette now, our chief international correspondent. Lise, what's your analysis of what's happening in the past few hours in Iran?
This is a confrontation which is very different from what happened last year, where, at least when it came to the region, Iran carefully telegraphed its attacks, took care to minimize the risk of causing American casualties. The reports are coming in, they're still coming in as I speak to you, that there are explosions being heard in Kuwait, also in the United Arab Emirates. Qatar, as you've been saying, had issued a warning to its citizens to shelter in place. There's also reports coming in of airstrikes in Iraq. Iran had warned that this time it would not hold back and that all of U.S. military bases across the region, including U.S. military personnel, there's more than 40,000 across the region, would be at risk. And President Trump himself acknowledged in his 8-minute video that there would possibly be the loss of American lives. But he made it clear that America, as he saw it, was under threat, and he was ordering this war to commence. A war, a military operation that the Pentagon has codenamed Epic Fury.
Lise, in his long announcement, President Trump said that regime change was very much on the table. What does that look like in your view? You were just in Iran in the past few weeks. Is your sense that this is going to target the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, the IRGC? How far do you think this could go?
Yes, President Trump and U.S. Commander-in-Chief we've often reported on BBC that he has sent conflicting messages about whether this was about Iran's nuclear program, that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, or that it was about broader regime change. He named all of these reasons this morning in that first post. And this is history tells us that there's been no example of an order, a government, an order being brought down by airstrikes alone. But President Trump has repeatedly said that he wants to keep his troops out of forever wars. He doesn't want to put boots on the ground. He made it clear that it would be up to the Iranian people to do that. Remember, during the protests of last month, he called on them to take control of your institutions. Well, the Iranians saw that when they take to the streets, that the security forces have lethal force, that they're able and willing to use. The death toll is in the many thousands. It's still being counted. There are still people, there are still families who don't know the fate of their loved ones. So it is a very unpredictable and a very perilous time. And this time, President Trump, unlike the lead up to the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, he didn't go to the UN Security Council. He didn't try to build a coalition in the region. He is doing this just with Israel. He seems to believe that right and history is on his side, but there is no evidence that we have seen, no evidence that this preemptive attack described by Israel, that there was an imminent Iranian threat on Israel or on the United States. So a new war has been unleashed, and this morning, in these early hours, no one can say with certainty when and how it will end.
Lise, in his statement, President Trump urged members of Iran's military to lay down their arms, called on Iranians to topple the regime, as you mentioned. He said bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we have finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will probably be your only chance for generations. Was there any sense when you were there that there were perhaps any cracks, any vulnerability in the many layers of enforcement that the regime has?
The exiled former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi had been saying for many months that they had set up a secure portal, that 50,000 security forces has indicated that they were ready to defect. He never provided any evidence of that. There were questions over that, whether that was really the case. You remember that when these protests intensified in January, when they spread across the country, there were many predictions that the Islamic Republic was on the brink of collapse, but we saw no evidence that there were major cracks in the security forces or at the top political echelons. There was no evidence of any defections. It was more that actually the political and security order pulled together. There are security forces, the elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the volunteer Basichi militia, who are hardline and ideological, who will fight to the end. Are there people within those forces who would be ready to lay down their arms because they know where this is heading? That is also possible too. Going to Iran this last time, Iran felt like a different country. We were really struck by how raw the anger and pain was after the losses in the security crackdown of weeks before. Iranians said to me, and I've never heard this in Iran before, people saying to me, we feel that we have no other option now. No one wants their country to be attacked, but we want there to be American military strikes because we feel this is the only way we can bring about change. But there were others who were really expressed their anxiety about another military attacks against Iran, didn't want to see another war, wanted the international sanctions to be lifted. Iran is very much on the crossroads, a country pulling in many directions. And now those decisions are out of their hands, and it is the hands of the military commanders now. And history tells us, and you hear generals in the Pentagon saying that no plan survives contact with the enemy. And in this case, the enemy is Iran, and it is carrying out the threat. It said, if you attack us this time, we will attack as we never have attacked before.
Lise, the US has seen Iran as an intractable problem since the 1979 revolution, one that has been an issue for subsequent presidents, really. Do you get the feeling that Donald Trump wants to be the president that deals with this regime once and for all?
That was a question that I asked diplomats in Geneva, where we just were, to see what was the third round of talks between Iranians and Americans, mediated by Oman. What did Trump really want? And there has been a sense, and how he has performed in office during this second time, that he likes the short, sharp, successful deal, the kind that he ordered in Venezuela, where they just went in. There were no American casualties. They took away President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. They're now waiting. They've been put on trial in New York. He didn't want a messy, chaotic war. He kept talking about Iraq and how chaotic and violent it had become when the Baathists, the ruling party in Iraq, had been pushed out of the army, and it left a vacuum. So all of the discussion, and of course everyone was kept guessing because we just didn't know. And President Trump himself said, even last night, that he hadn't made up his mind yet, that he wanted to avoid these messy confrontations, which would have no clear end. He ended the 12-day war last year, made it very clear to Israel, let's stop now. We've done enough. We've, in his words, obliterated Iran's nuclear program. But and so there was on offer, while it was still difficult, there was in reach a very narrow nuclear deal where he could say, I did a better deal than President Obama did in 2015. I am stopping Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Or there was this other possibility. He wants to be the president who says, I've done it, what no other president has done, always boasting. Well, there's little evidence to support it, that he ended 8 wars. Some of them are shaky ceasefires, and some of them have fallen apart. There was a bigger prize, and this is what Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel had been telling him. You can end nearly a half-century of enmity between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran has never been weaker externally and internally. Now is the time to strike. But there were leaders in the region saying, don't do it. We will all suffer. But he has listened to those voices who said, now is the time to strike, and to strike as hard as you can and as wide and deep as you can. It is unfolding in these early hours.
Lise, as ever, thank you for your analysis and your expertise. Just some reaction coming in from around the world now. The Reuters news agency is reporting Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese saying he supports the US acting to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapon, to prevent Iran continuing to threaten international security. We can now go live to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, welcome to you. What's your analysis of what's happening now in the region and whether or not this is an existential threat to the Iranian regime?
It's a very dangerous moment. It's a dangerous moment for the whole region, particularly the Gulf area. It's dangerous as well, of course, for the Israelis in terms of being hit back, and for the Americans in terms of Iranian retaliation. It's most dangerous of all for Iran, for the Iranian people who might be in the way of some of these missiles and airstrikes. And it's clear that what they're after, it seems to be anyway, judging by statements coming out of Trump and out of Prime Minister Netanyahu that they want regime change. There was a statement that just came out from Netanyahu saying that the people of Iran will be able to seize freedom or something like that, very much the same tone as Donald Trump. I have to say that there is not, that I'm aware of, one historical instance of regime change happening because of airstrikes. They seem, though, to be keen to put some real holes into the regime, perhaps decapitate it. I mean, who knows? What I would say is that this is a war of choice. They've used the word preemptive. Preemptive normally means there might be some imminent threat. They haven't said that there was actually an imminent threat. I think that just the fact that Iran has capabilities and an ideology which is vehemently anti-Israeli, and of course, they want the end of the Israeli state, that I think appears to be the preemption that they're trying to, the reason why they, in their words, preempting. But what we have to remember is that the war is a political act as well as just a military act. So if the objective is to get rid of the regime, well, I think the regime might be calculating, how long can they keep this one up? Can we, the regime, they might be saying, ride it out? Because, of course, one thing that happened during the war in the summer, so-called 12-day war, was that those stocks of interceptor missiles that the Israelis had and also that the Americans had, they burnt through an awful lot of them. And the Iranians might possibly be calculating that actually this is only going to go on for 4 or 5 days, 6, 7 days, something like that, and they can ride it out, and that if they survive, then for them survival might equal victory.
Jeremy, just some breaking news to bring our viewers. The AFP news agency is reporting that loud explosions have been heard in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, of course. You talked about this being a dangerous moment for the wider region. We now have heard alerts in Riyadh, in Bahrain, in Qatar as well. What is the potential here, given the number of US bases in the region?
Well, I think it's been widely discussed that if this was to happen, and it's happening, that the Iranians would hit back at US bases, they'd hit back at Israel. They wouldn't do it in the calibrated ways they've done in the past in the hope of trying to control an escalation. They seem to have concluded that that doesn't work for them, that actually a message of restraint that maybe they were trying to send was actually interpreted as weakness. So let's go all in from the outset. The point is that when war starts, it's unpredictable. People don't know which way it's going to go. And while those bases, American bases, if that's what they're trying to hit, would be very much on alert and people would be in their bunkers and their shelters and so on, they will be trying to hit back and exact some kind of a price from the Americans and from the Israelis, and indeed from anyone else who cares to help them. Because I think that there are some voices in circles in the US that you read saying that actually in private, the Gulf countries, the Gulf Arab states will be cheering all this on. I don't think they will be. I think that they look on America and Israel as dangerous and at times highly destabilizing powers. And I'm sure they will be very displeased, not to say rather horrified, by what is happening at the moment, because what particularly, the Saudis particularly, they've got lots of internal plans. What they want is a situation where essentially they can concentrate on internal matters. They do not want a war in the region.
Jeremy, just in the past few moments, the Reuters news agency has given a reaction from Iran's foreign minister saying that telling his Iraqi counterpart rather, that Tehran will continue to defend itself. And we are seeing that playing out right now, aren't we, in these strikes or reports of strikes across the region and also in Israel. Given that the US is the greatest military power in the world, and Iran clearly knows it can't win a conventional war against the US, against Israel, how does this play out?
Well, first of all, the answer is we don't know what's going to happen, because we've now gone into a very unpredictable period. There were reports early on that the Israelis were saying this might last 4 days. Well, it's not really up to them. If the Iranians want to continue sending missiles, if they had the capacity to do that, I think the way potentially that this plays out is that there is a very big onslaught lasting a number of days. They do an awful lot of damage, but then if what they are trying to do is to decapitate the Islamic regime, well, they might not succeed in that, because of course they will also have, like the Americans have been, and the Israelis who have been told to go to their shelters. I think you'll find that senior people in the regime will be doing that too, because they will be aware that something like this would have been about to happen. And the messages coming from Donald Trump and from Benjamin Netanyahu is that once we've finished with this, Iranian people, your hour of freedom is at hand. Well, it is a terrible regime, clearly, in Iran, a regime that is happy to send its men onto the streets, as happened earlier on in the year, to kill probably, as far as we know, thousands of people who were protesting against them. Well, those people, those protesters will be thinking, well, I think they'll probably do that again if we tried. So that is a sense of deterrence for them in doing that sort of thing. And another thing to recall is that the Iranian regime is highly ideological. The Shah was overthrown, a long time ago now, 1979, and they've been there, and they do have followers. It's not like the whole country is against them. They have supporters who believe in what they're doing and believe in the Islamic regime, and most important of all, they have security forces who, it has been proven time after time, are prepared to go into the streets to shoot their fellow citizens, to kill them for protesting against the regime. So while the regime is suffering from, massive economic crisis caused principally by sanctions, and while it's under huge external pressure, even before these airstrikes started a few hours ago, in terms of its own internal cohesion and capacity to inflict pain on its internal enemies, it does appear to retain that capacity. Maybe the point of the airstrikes is to try to eliminate that capacity, but trying to do things from long range is really difficult. That regime change from the air hasn't happened. When it's happened, when regimes have been overthrown, and I'm thinking about the Libyan regime, Colonel Gaddafi, 2011, Saddam Hussein, 2003, there's been men on the ground who've been fighting to start with, and also what followed was not some kind of a peaceful transition into liberal democracy and freedom and human rights for all. What happened was collapse, the collapse of those states, the collapse of those countries into failed states. More than 20 years on, Iraq is still dealing with the consequences of that. And as for Libya, well, Libya's in pieces. It has a couple of different governments. It has city-states who are pretty much self-governing. It has militias all over the place. And that's something that happened 15 years ago after the collapse of the Gaddafi regime. And Iran is a much bigger, in terms of population, country than that. So there are all kinds of imponderables ahead. And I'm not so sure how hard Donald Trump has thought about all of this. And if the Israelis have thought about it, well, I think that they have their own reasons for wanting to go ahead with this. Netanyahu, for many years, has said that the Iranian regime is the biggest existential threat that Israel faces. So he will want to take every advantage that he can to try and do it serious damage.
OK, Jeremy, thank you. Let's bring in our US correspondent, David Willis, who is in Washington. David, Donald Trump took to social media, Truth Social, just a couple of hours ago with an 8-minute video explaining what's happening. Take us through the key points of that.
Yes, and he did so just after 1 o'clock in the morning, local time. Samantha, it's coming up to dawn here, about 10 minutes or so to 5 o'clock in the morning. And in that address, Donald Trump talked about this major combat operation in Iran, what he's calling Operation Epic Fury. And there can never, he said, be a nuclear weapon in Iran. We had repeatedly tried to make a deal, but they just wanted to practice evil. And he called for the Iranian people to rise up and bring about regime change in their country, saying this was the best opportunity they have for generations. He also warned of the possibility of American casualties, saying the lives of courageous American heroes may be lost and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. Well, it is early in the morning here, but there has already been some reaction, and we've heard in the last few minutes from Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, a close ally of Donald Trump, a golfing buddy as well. And in a fairly lengthy post on X, he wrote, and I won't read it all to you, but I'll read an interesting bit. As to the men and women participating in this operation for our country and Israel, may God bless you and keep you safe. If you're injured or fall, I believe with all my heart that your sacrifice makes your country and the world a better and safer place. And that sort of message has been echoed in the last few minutes as well by the Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who has basically said Donald Trump has done what is right and necessary. There will be those in his own party, however, who do not agree with this action. And we heard fairly early on from Republican Congressman Thomas Massey, who wrote, and I quote, he said, acts of war unauthorized by Congress was how he described this strike on Iran. So it'll be interesting to see what further reaction we get in the next few hours as America wakes up to this news, Samantha.
David, stay with us. I just want to bring our viewers' reaction from the UK government, which have just released this statement in reaction to the Israeli-US attacks on Iran, saying a government spokesperson said Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and that is why we have continually supported efforts to reach a negotiated solution. Our immediate priority is the safety of UK nationals in the region, and we will provide them with consular assistance available 24/7. It goes on to say, as part of our long-standing commitments to the security of our allies in the Middle East, we have a range of defensive capabilities in the region, which we have recently bolstered. We stand ready to protect our interests. We do not want to see further escalation into a wider regional conflict. They also said that the UK has not participated in these strikes. David, let me pick up on that point about fears of a wider regional conflict. When Donald Trump was elected, when he came to power, he has spoken repeatedly of not wanting to get involved in so-called forever wars, referencing US action in Afghanistan, in Iraq, which we've seen the fallout for many years now. How will he justify this to the US people, given that it's clear no one will have any idea how long this could last and how widespread it could become?
Well, you're absolutely right, Samantha. And indeed, Donald Trump was elected on this promise to end, as you put it, forever wars. He was critical of one of his Republican presidential predecessors, George W. Bush, for getting bogged down in the conflict in Iraq. And there is every possibility, as we heard from Jeremy just now, that this could be a prolonged conflict. We don't know what sort of reaction, what sort of response there will be from Iran to all this. So it is political gamble for Donald Trump, but he has clearly been losing patience with the Iranians in recent weeks and months as these negotiations have failed to reach agreement on the basically a ban on nuclear weapons, the development of nuclear weapons in Iran. But as recently as last night in Corpus Christi, Texas, Donald Trump told reporters that he had, as he put it, an important decision to make, whether to go along with diplomatic attempts to resolve the situation in Iran, or to do what he has done overnight, or the military action that he has ordered overnight. It's interesting, though, because there were suggestions that those talks, mediated by Oman, were pretty close to pulling off some sort of diplomatic solution. But now, of course, events have turned in a different direction.
David, I just want to read out almost the top line of what Donald Trump said in his 8-minute statement. He said, "Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats." He also talked about the fact that for 47 years, the Iranian regime had chanted death to America, and that it waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder targeting the United States. Do you get the sense that going back to 1979, and this is a period of time that Donald Trump will remember, and the Iranian Revolution and the taking of hostages in the US Embassy, that he wants to be the president to end this regime? The Iranian issue, the Iranian regime has dogged American presidents ever since then.
It has, and of course Barack Obama really made very little progress as far as getting Iran to the negotiating table in this regard. And clearly Donald Trump believes that he has to take action that his predecessors have been unwilling to take for a variety of different reasons. But it is, of course, a massive gamble, and this could spread to bring in other countries in the region. We're already hearing suggestions that that may imminently be the case. So, Donald Trump really is, in a sense, some would argue, playing with fire with his decision to go ahead with these strikes on Iran, and strikes which are apparently not confined, as we were hearing, to the capital, Tehran, but to other key cities in that country.
David, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on what's happening there in the US. Let's bring in our correspondent, Barbara Platt-Usher now, who is in Doha. Barbara, in the past hour, we've heard reports of explosions in several countries close to you, around the UAE, in Qatar. Bring us up to date on that.
Yes, we heard a number of explosions here in Doha and got some warnings on our mobile phones saying that citizens should stay away from military installations and stay indoors. We also have reports quoting Qatari officials saying that they have intercepted a number of Iranian missiles fired at the country, and the target is the Al Udeid air base. This is the Americans' largest military base in the region. It's the headquarters for the Central Command, and it was targeted in June during the 12-day war by the Iranians, now only after they telegraphed it for a while, and it was really largely a symbolic effort. The Iranians had made clear before this conflict started now that they would not hold back this time, that they would act quickly, and that they would fire missiles not only at Israel but at the U.S. assets in the region. And there are 13 U.S. bases in the region, in the United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar, and in other places, along with about 40,000 troops. And we have been getting reports from around the region. In Bahrain, for example, the Bahrainis announced that a missile had hit the U.S. naval base there. This is the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. In United Arab Emirates, we've just got a word from the state news agency saying a person has been killed as the Emiratis were intercepting a missile from the Iranians. There's been the sound of explosions heard there as well in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And also a report that explosions were heard in Kuwait as well. So the Iranians do seem to be making good on their promise to make sure that they unleash the missiles that they have on those who are attacking them.
Barbara, to what extent will the US, will Donald Trump have consulted with those Arab leaders, with those Middle Eastern leaders before these strikes? Because he does have close relations, and of course he has all these bases in these countries, as you've just said.
His administration consulted extensively with them, and they were also very proactive in the 2 months leading up to this, trying to mediate a diplomatic solution to this crisis that Mr. Trump had essentially started, given that he had promised to intervene on behalf of protesters and then said, oh no, we're going to do a nuclear deal now, and if you don't agree to our terms, we'll attack you. So they had been very active in trying to prevent that from leading to a military confrontation, very worried about the consequences for the region, knowing that Iran would attack more broadly this time, but also this is a region that depends on oil and gas, and even if the oil supply is disrupted, that's a problem. But what if Iran would directly target oil and gas facilities? What will happen if the Iranian regime is the target of the strikes, which it turns out is the case? What would come next? Would it be something that would increase stability or decrease stability? And they had been looking at those examples of Iraq and Syria on their doorsteps. So they have been very active, and you're right, this administration has close ties with Arab leaders. You have not just political connections, but investment connections as well. But I think what's very clear in terms of what's happening now is that their advice is not the advice that Mr. Trump took. He took the advice of the Israelis.
Barbara, thank you. You're watching BBC News. Live from London, this is BBC News.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
The US and Israel launched strikes from air and sea in what they say will be a multi-day operation, dubbed by the Pentagon Epic Fury. Smoke can be seen in Tehran, with reports of people running in panic. There have been strikes right across the country. Iran has already been retaliating with attacks on American air bases in Bahrain. Explosions have been heard in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates.
Within the last 10 minutes, explosions overhead here in Jerusalem. Iran's retaliation has begun.
Sirens across Israel as a state of emergency is declared and Iranian missiles are intercepted over the country. In a statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there is an existential threat against his country. Hello, I'm Samantha Simmons. You're watching BBC News with live coverage of our breaking news this hour. The United States and Israel are launching airstrikes across Iran. President Trump says the US and Israel have launched major combat operations. Donald Trump says the objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. He says Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and he accuses the Republic of trying to rebuild its nuclear program. The president has also said there may be American casualties as a result of the operation dubbed Epic Fury by the Pentagon. The retaliation has started from Iran. Bahrain says the US base has come under attack. The United Arab Emirates, Kuwait and Qatar also report that they have had missiles fired into their countries, with reports of explosions in the Saudi capital Riyadh. In a video statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the attack is to remove an existential threat to his country. We've been hearing air raid sirens across Israeli cities. Israel's Defense Minister Katz has declared a special and permanent state of emergency, closed the country's airspace, and all schools are closed. Israeli defense forces warn they have identified missiles being launched by Iran towards Israel, and their defense systems are trying to intercept them. The combat operation has reportedly been planned for months. The strikes are across multiple locations. Media reports say blasts have been heard in Isfahan, Karaj, Kermanshah and Tabriz. Mehrabad Airport, just outside Tehran, has also come under attack. Smoke can be seen coming from buildings in Tehran, and people have reportedly been running away in panic. An Iranian official told the Reuters news agency that Tehran's retaliation and the response will be crushing. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei is reportedly not in Tehran, and Iran's president is described as safe, but 7 missiles have hit the presidential palace, and there have been strikes around the Supreme Leader's compound. The attack follows weeks of tension in the region, with US forces massing around Iran. Let's listen to what President Trump's statement from Mar-a-Lago said.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world.
President Trump there. We've been reporting on what's been happening in terms of the wider region, and the AFP news agency is just reporting that Jordan has now shot down 2 ballistic missiles targeting their kingdom. Let's speak to our correspondent John Donison, who is in Jerusalem and can bring us the latest from there. John, what's happening across Israel, where there is now a state of emergency and sirens sounding across many regions there?
Well, within the last hour, we've had sirens, every 10 minutes or so, and we've had explosions directly overhead here in Jerusalem. Israel's missile defense system shooting down projectiles further to the west on the coast in Israel's biggest city, Tel Aviv, and then also in Haifa. We know that there have been explosions there. Not sure whether any of those missiles managed to get through, but it's pretty clear that Iran's retaliation, which it says it will be crushing, has begun.
And tell us what Prime Minister Netanyahu has told his country about why they are doing this and now, and what the end goal is.
Well, he says that Iran poses an existential threat to Israel, and the end goal is eliminating that threat. And what Israel would like to see is a change of regime in Iran. Now, when you listen to that 8-minute address from President Trump, it was interesting. Towards the end, he said, when we are finished, he wants the Iranian people to rise up and seize their government, saying it was a once-in-a-generation opportunity for them, to paraphrase. So it does not seem at the moment like this is going to be a limited operation by the Americans and the Israelis to put pressure on Iran to maybe make concessions in those nuclear talks that we thought were ongoing. It seems like it's more than that, and this could be a campaign that lasts several days, in effect, a war.
And that's something, a message that Prime Minister Netanyahu has reiterated as well, speaking to the Iranian people. He said he wanted to create the conditions for them to change their destiny. What do you understand by that? And when we talk about regime change, what that could look like? Because, of course, at the top of the regime is the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who we understand has now gone into hiding, according to reports. But there are many layers of that regime that enforce his wishes.
Yeah, and the truth is you're not going to get regime change in Iran simply by carrying out airstrikes, no matter how extensive those strikes are. You can do a lot of damage, you can damage Iran's military capabilities, but in order to get regime change, you're either going to need boots on the ground. That seems very unlikely to me. But what it does require is for the Iranian people to rise up and take power. Now, that is something that so far, despite relatively large-scale protests that we've seen in recent months in Iran, that's something that they've not really come close to doing. It's something they've never been able to achieve in the past, but it's something that clearly the Americans and the Israelis think that by carrying out these strikes, it could create the conditions where the Iranian people feel able to do so.
I'm just reading, John, as we talk to you, the Reuters news agency saying that Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei and the Iran President Pezeshkian were both targeted in US-Israeli airstrikes. The results of the strikes are unclear. This is reported from an Israeli official. So as we talk about regime change, it is clear, according to this report on Reuters, that they are very much targeting, with their attacks, the Supreme Leader and the Prime Minister, and the President, rather.
Yeah, that's not something I've seen. It's not something I can confirm. But if the Israelis and the Americans were trying to take out the supreme leader, then that is obviously a massive step. It's massively inflammatory. It's not something that the Iranians are going to be able to sit back and ignore. And, you know, we have seen this retaliation has begun with missiles coming over, not just here, but to other parts of the region, as you were reporting. But I would imagine that it's just the start of it. You know, the Iranians are going to have to be calculating how do they respond to what's been done and how do they continue to respond if this major combat operations, as President Trump has called it, continues. Because in the past, you remember that 12-day war between Israel and Iran last year, you know, you saw fairly extensive ballistic missiles being fired over to Israel, causing casualties, causing damage. Now, Iran's military capability has been massively diminished in the various exchanges of fire and conflicts between Iran, Israel, and the United States over the last year or so, but it still has the capability to hit cities like Tel Aviv, to hit cities like Haifa hard. And certainly if they direct a large number of ballistic missiles at the center of Tel Aviv all at the same time, I think there is an exception within Israel that despite their incredibly capable missile defense shields, some will get through and you would end up with casualties.
Yeah, we also understand that here in the UK, the government has understandably advised against all travel to Israel and to Palestine. It's also holding an emergency COBRA meeting right now and says they stand ready to assist, but they have made it clear they haven't been involved in this joint operation. And this operation, John, it's clear from reports, has been many, many weeks in the planning, and Prime Minister Netanyahu was just in the United States in the past few weeks.
Yeah, I think it's probably been months in the planning. You know, I was actually in Jerusalem right at the start of the year, at the start of January, and then we were anticipating the possibility of American and Israeli strikes on Iran. But then the Americans, they didn't have the military hardware in place in the region to be able to do what they wanted to do. But over the recent weeks, they've shifted over a huge amount of military power to the region, to aircraft carrier groups, fighter jets, and you've got the largest military presence from the Americans in the region since the Iraq war back in 2003. So they clearly now feel that they've got their pieces in place and they can do what they want to do.
OK, John, thank you very much. We were just hearing as well that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, have said that dozens of missiles have been fired at Israel this morning, and they have confirmed that 70,000 reservists have now been sent call-up notices. So we understand that this is obviously a fast-moving situation with many new lines coming in by the moment. But tensions between Iran and the US are rooted in decades of mistrust and have escalated dramatically in recent months. So how did we get to this point? In June 2025, Israel attacked Iran, sparking a 12-day tit-for-tat war. The US joined the conflict, attacking 3 nuclear sites as part of what it called Operation Midnight Hammer. Iran responded in kind by targeting a military base in Qatar used by US troops. In late December, protests broke out in Tehran with people angry about economic conditions. Over the following days, those protests morphed into massive anti-government demonstrations across the country. In January, President Trump called on Iranians to keep going, telling them that help is on its way. But the protests were brutally suppressed by a government crackdown, with thousands of people killed. In recent weeks, the US has sent thousands of troops and what Trump has described as an armada to the Middle East, including 2 aircraft carriers, warships and fighter jets. Well, just a reminder of those breaking news lines in the past few minutes. The Israeli Defense Forces have said that dozens of missiles have been fired at Israel this morning. They've confirmed that 70,000 reservists have been called up. The United States and Israel, we are being told via the Reuters news agency, have targeted Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei and the Iranian president Masoud Pezeshkian. But the results of those strikes were unclear, according to Israeli officials, and they haven't provided any additional information on that. But Donald Trump made clear that regime change was very much at the top of his agenda in his 8-minute statement on Truth Social in the past few hours. We also know that there have been strikes in several neighbouring Middle Eastern countries, including Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. We haven't heard if there have been any casualties as a result of that. The UK government has given a statement this morning as well, saying Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and that is why we have continually supported efforts to reach a negotiated solution. They said their immediate priority is the safety of UK nationals in the region. They are providing them with assistance. They said, we do not want to see further escalation into a wider regional conflict. And we know that right now there is an emergency COBRA government meeting taking place. So, of course, we'll continue to update you on any new lines. But the UK is also urging citizens in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar and the UAE to take cover. Let's bring in Mikey Kay now, military analyst from the Security Brief, who joins me. Hi, Mikey. Good to see you. Give us your analysis of what's happening militarily that we know of right now.
OK, so I think it's really important. First thing to say is that there's no approval by Congress. There's no UN Security Council resolution that backs this. And the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation States, have not bought into this. So this is a bilateral operation between Israel and the United States. Open source intelligence this morning indicates that we've seen Tomahawk land attack missiles going across Iraq. The Tomahawk land attack missile is a cruise missile that is launched from submarines or cruisers or destroyers, and they are likely to be part of the Gerald Ford carrier strike group, which is in the Mediterranean at the moment. And we know that because they're coming across Iraq. What does the TLAM do, the Tomahawk land attack missile? It's got a range of about 1,000 miles plus. It can put a penetrator head on the top, which means that it can be used against installations that are underground, so command and control nodes. It can be used against surface-to-air missile systems, and it can be used against airfields which have aircraft on them. That's called OCA, offensive counter-air. And what that means in terms of military doctrine is that you try and strike the aircraft on the ground before they get airborne. From the IDF, we've also seen airborne strikes. We don't know what jets they're using at the moment, but we do know that US F-22 Raptors, so the F-22 Raptor is the most advanced air-to-air aircraft in the world. It's a 5th gen, it's got stealth. They arrived in Ovda Air Base in South Israel yesterday. Started off with a package of 12 from RAF Lakenheath, where they were staging through. One aircraft went US, which meant that there were 13 there, and we're awaiting the arrival, if they haven't arrived already, of the last 13, which puts 24 F-22s inside Ovda Air Base in southern Israel. So we knew that the IDF were potentially going to do the preeminent strike. We don't know what aircraft they're using. We don't know what route they've taken in, but we know that the TLAMs are likely coming from the Mediterranean, from the Ford carrier strike group.
What do you make of these reports coming from Israel that they have targeted in this operation the supreme leader and the president of Iran?
Well, I think we should put a bit of nuance on this. They've targeted the residence of the supreme leader. He is highly unlikely to be inside his residence.
In fact, we understand that he's not.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a message. That's a message to Iran in terms of we're going to target the residents of that, and I totally understand that. Getting the Ayatollah, that's a very different beast. If we look at the Maduro operation in Venezuela and what that took in order to lift Maduro, Venezuela geographically is a much easier country to do that strike op. It's called a heli attack force strike op. The surface-to-air missile systems are much easier to soften up. The geography of getting the 160th Night Stalkers across Venezuela is way easier than any form of similar operation on the Ayatollah. So I'm not saying that the Ayatollah isn't part of one of the primary objectives or primary targets. The likely primary targets will be the Ayatollah and high-value targets inside the Iranian Guard Corps, the IRGC. But then as we've heard Trump speaking, the other primary objectives are ballistic missile sites and the enriched uranium. The enriched uranium is a much, much harder target to engage. And we saw on Operation Midnight Hammer during the 12-day war last year, that required a number of what's called B-2 Spirit bombers, the triangular wing stealth bomber, which flew from Whitman Air Base in Missouri on a one-way mission, took about 36 hours. And they ended up dropping what was called a GBU-57. That's called a massive ordnance penetrator. It's a 30,000-pound bomb, basically, that can only be dropped from the B-2. And 14 of those were dropped on 3 of the Iranian nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. So as one of the objectives that the US might have, which is the nuclear facilities, that is a much, much bigger operation. Trump's also talked about, and I was just come back from Geneva with Christian Fraser. We were outside where the negotiations were happening on Thursday. The other 2 objectives that the US administration were looking at were Iranian proxies and the ballistic missile sites. Now, Iran has the most comprehensive, volume-wise and diverse-wise, it has the most diverse ballistic missile capability in the entire Middle East. So when Donald Trump is saying that they're going after the ballistic missile sites, some of those might be stationary in silos, but a lot of them are mobile. And that is an incredibly hard objective to achieve in its entirety. Will they be able to degrade them? Yeah, of course they will. Will they be able to completely annihilate them? Absolutely not, because you can move them. Now, what the F-35, which is a fifth-generation fighter that the Americans used in Venezuela, was used for, which is fascinating, but it won't be able to use for this in Iran, is it's a sensor platform. So it wasn't dropping bombs. It was sat off the Venezuelan coast, and it was using its sensors to detect where Venezuelan surface-to-air missile systems, mobile missile systems were. And when those mobile systems started moving, the F-35 was using its sensor to feed back updated GPS coordinates into those TLAM missiles, which would then allow to strike that. And that's not going to be, they're not going to be able to do that in Iran, because Iran is 3 times the size of Iraq.
The Reuters news agency is just reporting some Saudi reaction from the foreign ministry there, condemning the Iranian attacks on the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait and Jordan, as well as Saudi itself. Given that these are, Mikey, all allies of the US, they all have US bases there, which no doubt is what the Iranians are probably targeting, but we don't have direct information on exactly what those targets are.
Yeah, I think we've got a graphic, actually, of where the US bases are.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So they are multiple, they are widespread. What is the risk here of a wider conflagration with these countries being targeted by Iran?
Well, I think there'll definitely be communications going on between the US and Qatar. You've got Al-Udeid, so you can see Al-Udeid. Let's just basically run through. So you've got US bases in all along the Persian Gulf. You've got Iraq to the north. You've got Kuwait. As you come down, you've got Qatar. You've got the UAE. And then also there's a huge build-up of US military capability in Muwafaq Air Base in Jordan. So Al-Udeid is really important. It's the largest US base in the Middle East, and we can just zoom in on that. And it's got an air base, and it's got what's based there at the moment are called the KC-135 and KC-46 airborne tankers. So they can get airborne and basically provide a petrol station in the sky to sustain air operations. But it's also got the Combined Air Operations Center. It's called the KAOC. And I've been in there. If you go in there, it's basically just a huge operations center that governs CENTCOM operations all across the area of responsibility for CENTCOM, which is as far west as Egypt and as far east as Kazakhstan. So it's huge. So there's significant military capability in Al-Udeid alone. And of course, that's going to be one of the primary targets from Iran. All of the air bases have got potential to be targeted. So I think that's to be expected in terms of a retaliatory response. But again, conversations will be going on in terms of how this escalates.
Yeah, let me just bring in a couple of lines. The US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, are monitoring Iran operations from Mar-a-Lago. That is, of course, Donald Trump's home in Florida. That's being reported by someone who is apparently familiar with the matter. We've also got reaction in from the EU's Ursula von der Leyen saying we call on all parties to exercise maximum restraints to protect civilians and to fully respect international law. We're also hearing that there have been several explosions heard in Abu Dhabi's near the city's main airport. Airspace has been closed across most of this region now, and travel obviously restricted. Yeah, the UK's Gatwick Airport has also reporting restrictions in the Middle East. Some flights to and from London may experience delays or cancellations. So yeah, you can appreciate that as all of these countries are reacting around the world, flights being cancelled and rerouted by the moment. Well, let's speak to Dr. Badr Al Saif, an assistant professor at Kuwait University and the president of Al Saif Consulting, who's been hearing strikes. Welcome to you. Tell us what you've been hearing.
It's our worst nightmares come true in the Gulf, Samantha, where sirens are off in Kuwait. They've been going on at it for the past few hours. Our belief is that we've intercepted Iranian missiles for now, and we hope that we continue to do so in the coming hours and hopefully no more of this. I mean, it just tells you how high the threat perception of Iran is to begin by hitting their closest neighbors. Granted, they think that it's the US bases that they're hitting, but they're really hitting their neighbors. And those are Gulf neighbors that have been trying very hard to avert war. I mean, you saw the Omani foreign minister in the US yesterday and a few days before in Geneva. The same thing has been happening by other capitals in the region. So the Gulf states don't deserve such a predicament. I think they need to focus on US targets elsewhere if they were to go at that war. And you know, it's a blow to diplomacy from all sides. This is happening as diplomacy was being pursued for the second time. The same thing happened last June. In the middle of diplomatic talks, the US and Israel decided to strike. So it sends, you know, a tough lesson for diplomacy and for watchers of diplomacy.
What's happening across Kuwait now? What's the government advising you? How are you feeling, you and your family?
I mean, look, streets are, I mean, it's the weekend. It's a long weekend. We just celebrated our National Day and Liberation Day in the past 2 days. So it's quiet because of that. But you can feel that it's even more quiet around us with the sirens off. People are bracing for the worst. We're confident that there will be measures taken to protect us. There hasn't been any casualties. We've heard of something in Jordan at the moment. So we're watching and comparing with other capitals that are being hit across the Gulf and in Jordan. And we just, you know, we're praying for the best. Diplomacy needs to come back on track. This is not going to be solved by war,
okay,
right? And the objective is not quite clear.
Dr.
I mean, it came out.
Yeah, I just want to pause you there because there's been some reaction from Donald Trump, who's given an interview with the Washington Post. I just want to bring our viewers those lines. He has said that his main concern is freedom for the Iranian people and the US is working to make Iran a peace that is safe. He said, all I want is freedom for the people. He was asked about what he hoped his legacy would be as a result of the operation. He said, I want a safe nation, and that's what we are going to have. Doctor, let me ask you, you said that this is your worst nightmare. Donald Trump has said it's clear he wants regime change. Would regime change make the region a safer place?
Has regime change worked in the past with the other countries around us in the region? The regime change was a platform that he went into election against in the last two, you know, election cycles. So regime change usually comes with it regime collapse. It comes chaos, fragmentation, spillovers to other countries. It's not a straightforward answer. So to move on from the very limited goal of blocking any ambitions for being a nuclear state to negotiating proxy actions by Iran to now going to the maximalist objective of regime change is quite something. And it speaks to the threat perceptions from both sides, the Iranians and the Americans, right? I mean, they're both going at it, and that's why you're seeing all these attacks at the different Gulf states, things that we haven't seen in the last showdown last June. So that says something about where we're headed. It's unclear. There is no clear trajectory. I think there will be much more chaos down the line.
Okay, Doctor, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for telling us what your experiences are and your analysis. And just also a report on the AFP news agency that fresh blasts have been heard in Abu Dhabi, according to residents who have spoken to that news agency. We can speak to Ahmed Mamarian now, who is the senior Iran analyst at Dawn, a foreign policy think tank focused on the Middle East. Welcome to you. Good to speak to you. What's your analysis of Donald Trump's objectives today?
President Trump, in his 8 minutes address, he listed a long list of American grievances when it comes to the Iranian regime, from the revolution and chanting death to America to the hostage crisis and holding American diplomats for 440 days in captivity, and then Iran's missile program, Iran's nuclear program, and at the end, you know, the regime change that he promised. Basically, what he said was that Iranians, for now, go to their homes because there would be bombs everywhere, but they have to come and take over the government and ask the military to lay down their arms, because those who lay down their arms would be safe. But, you know, so anyways, in general, I think that he had a long list of objectives, and it was not very clear what was the exact the main objective, but it's definitely a framework for regime change. There's so much to be unfolded. It's a very vast, huge objective with a lot of unknowns. Right now in Tehran, I heard from people who heard bombings in different places going back to their homes. and very much curious to see what unfolds next.
How vulnerable is the regime right now, given that its proxies across the Middle East are severely weakened after the last 2.5 years, given that there have been these mass protests last month across the country, which were brutally put down with many thousands killed, some reports of possibly tens of thousands. But there are clearly many people within the country who do want a change. How weakened do you think the leadership is?
The leadership in Iran is at its weakest position in the past few decades. As you mentioned, they have lost so much of their wings in the past 2 years in the region. Also, militarily, when it comes to the U.S. and Israel, they have a huge disadvantage. I think over the past few months, they have been bluffing about their military capacity and their power to retaliate when it comes to the domestic situation. The Iranian regime faces a huge legitimacy crisis inside the country, particularly after the January massacre. The Iranian people, a vast majority of the Iranian people do not want this government. They killed thousands of people, and many people inside the country were desperate to get help to somehow overcome the repression machinery. So that's why we are seeing scenes that are unprecedented in recent history, that many people from the videos that have been published over the past few hours, that there are students in the schools showing are happy, showing the smoke in the air of the attacks, and are happy about the attacks, or which shows that the frustration and the lack of legitimacy of the Iranian government, and how they made themselves so vulnerable when it comes to the Iranian people in a way that many people inside the country, they welcome any means to overcome the Islamic Republic. So yes, they have a very huge disadvantage militarily when it comes to the Iranian people domestically. They are very much in a very bad shape.
Ahmed, what's your analysis of what regime change may look like? Many analysts have suggested that what Donald Trump may be after is something similar to the situation in Venezuela, where he took out President Maduro but left much of the leadership in place, giving them the ultimatum, you do as I say and you can stay, otherwise it's the same for you. Is that a possible scenario in Iran, where possibly the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and the president are taken out, removed from the picture in some way, but the rest of the apparatus possibly stays in place with a maybe more moderate leader?
As I said, there is so much unknowns in this operation. From what President Trump said, the scope of the operation, the military operation, is regime change. What they are wishing for is regime change. What they are doing is to dismantle Iran's political leadership and command control, the military, Iran's naval capacity and all that, and then provide a situation in which people, or we don't know, at some point other groups to come on to the streets, and somehow the military lay out their arms, and we have a collapse of the regime. But this is, we have to see what's, we don't know much about the endurance of the regime. We don't know how the regime has prepared for this situation, because in June 2025, the Iranian regime was caught by surprise. Right now, I think for the past 8 months, they have been waiting for this moment. So there is much more readiness for this moment. We have to see how these attacks unfolds in the next few hours, next few days, and then the readiness of the Iranian regime. But regimes like the Islamic Republic are much weaker than what they project. So it might be, so we're going to see the next few days. But I think it's anybody who predicts based on what President Trump said, that this is what they want, but whether they can achieve it, we have to see in the next few days.
Ahmed, I also want to ask you about any potential new leader. We've heard lots in recent months from the son of the late Shah, Reza Pahlavi, and possible support for him, but he hasn't lived in the country for more than 45 years. How much support do you think there is in Iran for him, and who could a potential leader, who could people rally around in the form of a potential new leader?
As you mentioned, he has not been in the country for the past 47 years. And when the situation is very volatile and there is a chaos and there's a vacuum of power, then it really matters who's on the ground, who has the organization, who has the military and power and the network. And all those elements really matter when it comes to that very fragile moment. At this point, he has support definitely within Iran. He has a lot of support within Iran, but that support has to be translated to organization, to a movement that can take over institutions and claim victory. At this point, we don't know how much that is a feasible option and whether this is an option that the U.S. is going after. But we have to see, how these forces come together in the next few days. Definitely, we have to see a fraction within the establishment in the next few days by dismantling the leadership or by removing some of these political leaders from the scene. There might be a vacuum in the power, and other people come to the scene. But in general, I would say we are in the very, very early stages of this conflict, and it's very unclear the direction it's headed. There are so many different scenarios, but at the moment, when we get to that moment, it really matters who is on the ground, who has power, who has the army, who has the guns, and how much the core of the Islamic Republic fractures. How much of that we see the split, and there is a fracture if there is a fracture within the regime. That, I think, would be very significant. If there is a fracture, then that could escalate other developments.
Ahmed Mamarian, thank you very much for bringing us your analysis. Just some new lines coming in, reported on the Reuters news agency from Iran's IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps there, saying that all Israel and US bases in the region have been struck by the powerful blows of Iranian missiles. They said this operation will continue relentlessly until the enemy is decisively defeated. Let's speak now to our correspondent, David Willis, who is in Washington. David, welcome to you. And Donald Trump has given a few comments to the Washington Post. Bring us up to date.
Yes, that's right, Samantha. A short while ago, he said that his main intention was freedom for the Iranian people, as he put it. And that was the intention with these strikes on Iran. But it is, of course, worth remembering that Donald Trump was elected on a promise to steer clear of so-called forever wars. He was critical of one of his Republican presidential predecessors, George W. Bush, for getting embroiled in the long-running conflict in Iraq. And indeed, the previous attack on Iran, Operation Midnight Hammer back in June, was much more of a surgical strike aimed at taking out 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. Well, now President Trump has put the United States into a position where it is involved in a massive and ongoing operation, as he put it, in that country. And also President Trump warning the American people of the possibility of US casualties. This, of course, all without any approval on the part of Congress. And we've already heard from the Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, who wrote on X, "Acts of war unauthorized by Congress," his characterization of the strikes on Iran that we've seen in the last few hours. Samantha.
And what reaction, how soon can we expect any reaction from Republicans, from Democrats, from the American people who, as you talked about, will no doubt not want to be drawn into a potential long-term conflict?
Well, the word of these strikes came about after 2 o'clock in the morning here in Washington, D.C. It's now, 5:42 in the morning. So Americans will be waking up in the next few hours to this news. And it has prompted reaction from some Republicans that is favourable to Donald Trump, although Lindsey Graham, the senator, also made the point in a long post on X. As to the men and women participating in this operation for our country and Israel, may God bless you and keep you safe. If you are injured or fall, I believe with all my heart that your sacrifice makes your country and the world a better and safer place. So reinforcing Donald Trump's suggestion that this is not potentially without American casualties. The Democrat Senator John Fetterman in the last hour or so coming to the support of Donald Trump, though, on this, saying that Mr. Trump has been willing to do what is right and necessary to produce real peace in the region. So it will be very interesting, Samantha, to see what other reaction we get, as I say, in the next hour or so as people here on the East Coast wake up to this news.
David, I know you'll keep us up to date for now. Thank you. Let's speak to Chatham House's Middle East Director, Sanam Vakil. Sanam, welcome to you. The US and Israel launch this attack on Iran, calling it a major combat operation. This comes after weeks of tensions in the region, a huge US military build-up. Was it, do you think, to some extent expected?
Yes, it was expected. I think that the Iranians were certainly negotiating in the hope of obtaining a deal, but certainly also preparing for this war. And we know this because their response has been rather quick. The strikes began this morning around the 6 o'clock hour here. And by 10 o'clock, the Iranians began striking back against Israel as well as U.S. military facilities across the Gulf. So they are prepared. They've also got plans to replace the chain of command. And I think they're expecting a long and drawn-out conflict.
And what's your analysis of this military operation? We've heard that the Supreme Leader and the President of Iran have been targeted, the distinctions being made about whether or not it was their locations where they live, their homes that have been targeted, or directly themselves. We understand the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is not in his official residence. He has moved elsewhere. Is that, we have heard from the President that regime change is what he wants. How achievable do you think that will be?
Well, I think that the Islamic Republic and its leadership have known quite from the last round of war seen in June of 2025 that both Israel and the United States, if they're going for another round, are not just trying to bring Iran back to the negotiating table for a better deal. This second war is about decapitating the regime and seeing what comes next, and hoping perhaps that a system will be more pliant and pliable for the United States and Israel as well. Taking out the Iranian Supreme Leader was attempted, I think, also in the last war. He is certainly underground and has been for quite some time now. There are suggestions that he will make some sort of speech to show proof of life, but also to show that there are plans and a command structure underway. In the June 2025 war, it was made public that their names on a list in case he is killed. Ali Khamenei, I think, would rather go down as a martyr. He has been leader of the Islamic Republic since 1989, than submit to President Trump in what is very clearly a regime change operation, and one that won't be easy to achieve. But I certainly would say that the Islamic Republic, after the coming days and weeks, and we don't know how long this is going to go on for, will not look the same.
I'm just reading from BBC Persian an update that numerous explosions have been heard in Tehran. The office of Iran's Supreme Leader and the presidential office in Tehran have been targeted. Military sites have been targeted as well in Kermanshah, Qom, Isfahan, Tabriz, Karaj. The Israeli Defense Force has warned Iranian civilians to evacuate areas near military sites and installations ahead of those strikes. And last year in the 12-day war, there were a number of Iranians who were killed in those strikes. And there was, to some extent, a certain amount of rallying around the flag of people coming out in defense of their country, if not the regime. Do you perhaps foresee that happening in this scenario, or is that shifted exponentially because of the huge protests in January?
I don't think we can have these sort of zero-sum takeaways. Because Iranians didn't come out to protest during the 12-day war last summer didn't mean that they were wholly in favor of the Islamic Republic. And despite these protests, doesn't mean that we just saw in January that Iranians are wholly against a foreign war against Iran. I think certainly people are not going to be protesting while missiles and bombs are raining down across the country. We have to see if the United States is able to dismantle this regime. This regime is institutionalized, it's bureaucratized, it's been in power for almost 5 decades. So if there is fragmentation at the elite level, if the military chooses to break away and people join together, that is what we should be looking for. But I don't expect that it will happen a couple hours after a military operation has begun. It will happen when the bombs stop and people are given space and agency to be involved in what comes next.
The Saudi government have condemned what it called Iranian aggression against the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait and Jordan. The UAE have said that one person has been killed by debris after Iranian missiles were intercepted. What is the potential wider implications for the region?
Well, it's not potential. It's happening in real time. We have seen Iran immediately, as fast as it could, launch missiles across the region, targeting Israel specifically, but also military bases across the Gulf states. This is no surprise. The Iranians have been saying over the past weeks and even days that that would be their military response. This is an existential moment for the Islamic Republic. They are fighting for their survival, and the only way that they can survive the onslaught of a U.S. and an Israeli attack, which is simultaneous, is to quickly export this war across the region to destabilize as many countries as possible, and to make this not just a U.S., Israel, Iran war, but to make this a consequential war for the wider Middle East.
But presumably because they have U.S. bases, they are U.S. allies, their allegiance lies with the US, with Israel, despite how complicated the region is?
I wouldn't make these sort of, again, black or white assessments. The region is the one, all of the countries of the Middle East are now heavily involved, and their populations are deeply worried. This is equally existential for people to see drones and missiles flying over their airspace. People will die, and it won't just be Iranians or Americans or Israelis. Gulf states have, of course, long hosted U.S. Air bases and military facilities, hoping that those facilities would protect them from Iranian or broader attacks. And we're seeing the balance change in the region. Threat perceptions definitely change in the region. The Gulf states do not want to be dragged into this war, tried to lobby against this war, appeal to President Trump to pursue the path of diplomacy. And here we are again, facing a broader and much more dangerous war that won't be limited just to Iran and the Iranian people. And certainly over the past year, if not two, particularly when Qatar itself was struck by Iran and Israel in 2025, Gulf states made clear that they didn't just see Iran as a regional destabilizer, but also began to see Israel as a regional destabilizer, a country that continued to strike Lebanon, Syria, but also the Gulf states. So we have to understand the nuance here and appreciate the danger of this war and the impact of this war across the Middle East.
Sanam, thank you. Well, let's bring in Mikey Kay, military analyst from the Security Brief. Mikey, welcome. Just in the past few minutes, Reuters is reporting a response from Kuwait, which says it reserves the right to defend itself after the Iranian attack. So let's pick up on that point that Sanam was making there about the potentials for a wider conflagration. Yeah, I mean, look at the moment, it's about defending the bases, it's about defending territory. And the big question for me is, Iran has a massively diverse ballistic missile capability with volume. And the big question I've got is, sort of in my own mind, is what are the stockpiles that Iran has? And then
as a consequence of that, it's what capability, how much stockpiles on Patriot missile systems, which are anti-ballistic missile, cruise missile systems, and THAAD, which is terminal high altitude air defense. Now, these systems have been put into the region as part of this US military buildup, but there'll be only so many stockpiles that THAAD and Patriot have. And then obviously that translates to Israel's Iron Dome. An Iron Dome is a 3-tiered layered defense system that uses the Tamir missile out to 40 kilometers, David's Sling out to 300 kilometers, and then what's called the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 missiles out to 2,000 kilometers. And the Arrow 3 can actually intercept ballistic missiles outside of the atmosphere. So the big guessing game at the moment is how many stockpiles do all of these bases within the region have, including Israel's Iron Dome, and what can Iran, ballistic missile-wise, throw at those bases. Now, that's just a small part of where the potential threat comes from. We cover this, by the way. We did a whole security brief with Christian Fraser, which went onto YouTube yesterday. It's a 20-minute piece that covers all of this. So the viewers, if they want more information, can go onto YouTube because we cover all of these eventualities. But Iran just doesn't have ballistic missiles. It's got a very comprehensive, what's called one-way attack drone threat, and that's the Shahed 136. So when Iran decides that, or if it decides that the air bases, the US air bases in the region have been struck, if Iran decides to then start launching drones, and you'll ask what would they launch drones at? Well, the US have 2 carriers now in the region. It's got the Gerald Ford, which is in the Mediterranean, and its carrier strike group, and that's likely where the Tomahawk land attack missiles came from to launch the initial strike this morning. But it's also got the Abraham Lincoln, which is in the region as well. And the latest information we have on that is that that carrier strike group, if you can see on the map, in the bottom right-hand region, it's Oman. That's where that's going to be based off. So that's an important part of the equation.
Mikey, thank you very much for taking us through all that. And as you said, plenty more on the security brief. Well, earlier we spoke to Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, for his analysis on how this may all play out.
First of all, the answer is we don't know what's going to happen because we've now gone into a very unpredictable period. There were reports early on that the Israelis were saying this might last 4 days. Well, it's not really up to them. If the Iranians want to continue sending missiles, if they had the capacity to do that, I think the way potentially that this plays out is that there is a very big onslaught lasting a number of days. They do an awful lot of damage, but then if what they are trying to do is to decapitate the Islamic regime, well, they might not succeed in that because, of course, they will also have, like the Americans have been, and the Israelis, who have been.
Go to the ends of the earth. We'll hit the heights.
A great adventure together.
And reach for the stars.
Star power. I like it.
So cool.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Something that's undeniable.
With mindfulness. Innovative.
Magical.
It's like being a child.
And truly original reporting.
God, you do your research. I tell a good story.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
The 18-year-old soccer sensation igniting worldwide buzz.
How good is this kid?
The defenders are just bewitched. Lamine Yamal.
You ever talk to the soccer ball?
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to The Takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity, informality, and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on The Takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7.
You both had talked about going on Survivor together.
Right. A Survivor contestant believes his sister was murdered.
I'm sorry.
that I couldn't protect you.
And is determined to be her voice.
This is her speaking to everyone saying, don't let this happen to you.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gail King. Hey!
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning. CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount Plus. See you at 7. CBS Mornings.
I want a mug. Yeah, good mug.
A stalker sends menacing messages to a young mother before she's murdered.
They all just kind of said, I can't believe this happened. He did it. The stalker did it.
There's a killer out there, and we're gonna go after him.
But the investigation reveals a sinister setup.
I think his head is spinning, thinking about what else are they gonna find.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Money Watch is your no-nonsense guide to taking control of your finances, where I offer practical, real-world advice with no jargon and no judgment. I'm Jill Schlesinger. Listen to Money Watch wherever you get your podcasts.
It could be the greatest turnaround in college football history.
What is the magic here?
The undefeated Big Ten champs, Indiana Hoosiers.
CBS Morning.
CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount Plus. See you at 7.
CBS Mornings.
Hi there, I'm Chanel Call, and this is The Uplift. We have a great show for you with a great cast of characters, including these. A teacher who took a small stash of money and made it grow by starting a chain reaction of kindness among her students. A group that's helping save Florida's state treasure one manatee at a time. Plus, a man who's had the same job for 50 years, bringing the majestic pursuit of whales to the masses. Plus, Kermit the Frog, did you know he recently made a move from Hollywood to Atlanta? We'll explain the reason for that relocation. And our Nate Burleson explores a New York City staple. And get this, it's not pizza, it's not bagels. So what delicacy are we talking about? Well, you'll find out. All of that and more heartwarming news. You're watching The Uplift. Welcome to The Uplift, the show that lifts you up for at least the next 30 minutes. It's the middle of winter, and many parts of the country have experienced some frigid temperatures, ice, and snow. It might be wicked weather for adults, but for kids, the potential for a snow day is magical. Here's Steve Hartman.
As the snow piled up, so did the anticipation. Could it happen? Would school be canceled? Absolutely.
Yes!
This week, millions of kids in more than 24 states got at least one snow day, including my kids, who flipped and flopped all over themselves in jubilation. And not just because of the snow.
I caught it!
Or even because of the day off, but because snow days are the ultimate American freebie.
The beauty of a snow day is that you're playing with house money, so you can spend it in any way you want, and you don't have to feel guilty about it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
We can all relate.
That's a great way to put it.
But perhaps no one in America cherishes that feeling more than 64-year-old Jeff Shamus. When Jeff was 14, he got his first and only snow day.
San Francisco looked like a Christmas card after its biggest snowfall in 89 years.
It was February 1976. Jeff was living in the Bay Area, and he vividly remembers the snow and the snowman he built with his sister. He says it was a feeling so grand, he didn't want it to end.
You know, it started melting, and I was like panicking. And the only thing I could think of was, I gotta preserve the moment. That was my only goal.
And that is why, 50 years later, if you look in his garage, in the back left corner of his freezer, you will find what is now widely considered to be the world's oldest snowball.
All right, here it is.
Now a family heirloom, carefully saved in a Skippy peanut butter jar.
You can't let a 50-year-old snowball melt. I'm gonna get some water.
Okay, wait, that's not it, is it?
No.
Bottom line, if you have yet to save your snowball for posterity, there's still plenty of heirloom out there. But don't wait too long.
It's a snow day.
Because the doldrums of spring
It's a snow day.
are now just 51 days away.
And you don't have to do your homework.
Steve Hartman, CBS News, at home.
All right, so winter brings snow day potential to kids, and for some whales, it brings migration potential. Scott Rates from CBS San Francisco recently went whale watching with a captain who's been keeping an eye on these magnificent creatures for about 50 years.
Catching a glimpse of this off the Monterey coast is why folks line up here early every morning.
Are you guys ready to go? Yeah. There we go.
The Princess Monterey is moored here at the Monterey Wharf. Its mission? To find whales.
This is one of the few places where you actually have whales year-round.
Brett Williamson is the captain of this ship. He's only been doing this for 50 years.
It was better than being behind a desk or something for me anyway, so it's worked out.
Captain Williamson says that over the years, he has seen the whale population actually increase.
But now there's more whales now than when I started 50 years ago. As the years have been going along, we're getting more and more whales because there's no hunting of.
And we're talking about all kinds of whales.
We get killer whales, blue whales, and sperm whales sometimes, fin whales. Humpbacks are our most common whales now, and then we get the gray whales that migrate here between Christmas and Easter.
Right now in the wintertime, we're in the middle of the gray whale migration, making their way south from Alaska down to Baja.
Gina Thomas is the manager here. She tracks the whales very closely.
They say it's approximately a 12,000-mile round-trip journey that these whales make every year.
While they have seen a steady number of whales, the majestic mammal does face dangers.
One of the concerns is the health of the oceans. You know, if that food cycle breaks down, that's going to be a little bit more challenging.
Another concern?
Sometimes I do get entangled in fishing gear.
So there are conflicts between the gear and the whales. So they're trying to reach a kind of a happy medium with new types of gear to use.
Terry Sheneman was the first in line Tuesday morning. For him, every trip is special.
You always see something, so it's never a wasted trip.
Gina telling me that the humpback whales are especially a sight to see.
When you have a 50-foot animal approach the boat, roll over, and look at you eye to eye, that's a decision they've made.
You just never know what you're going to see.
And that's what keeps this captain steering through the waves.
As long as I still enjoy doing it, I'm going to keep doing it.
Coming up, from the whales of Monterey to the manatees of South Florida, we take you on a rescue mission to save a mother and her calf. And we're sticking on theme, well, sort of, from whales to manatees to frogs. Well, one frog in particular, Kermit.
We're in a secret location.
It's an undisclosed location. We should say that we're not even allowed to say where we are.
Why did the beloved Muppet recently make headlines? We'll tell you after this break.
Are you ready? Here he is. He's wrapped in a blanket.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gail King. Hey!
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning. CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning. CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount. See you at 7.
CBS Mornings.
I want a mug. Yeah, good mug.
Politics isn't a game. When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives? Politics is about policy.
So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like healthcare?
I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun.
Do you know if there are active terror cells in the United States right now?
To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity, informality, and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who was a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on The Takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7.
Money Watch is your no-nonsense guide to taking control of your finances, where I offer practical, real-world advice with no jargon and no judgment. I'm Jill Schlesinger. Listen to Money Watch wherever you get your podcasts.
One thing is very clear.
CBS Mornings is clearly fun.
Watching Rocky with Rocky.
Morning, good vibes.
Gail came in singing for me today. CBS Mornings.
Weekdays at 7.
You there?
Manatees are a state treasure in Florida, but right now they are under threat. Luckily, there are some groups helping to save and rehabilitate manatees in need, and our Christian Benavides was able to catch one of those rescues.
At Pennycamp State Park near Key Largo.
Coming backwards, 1, 2, 3.
This team from the Dolphin Research Center gathered for a special moment. A manatee mother named Stripes and her calf were released back into the ocean Wednesday after months of rehabilitation from a fishing line accident. Mom required a partial amputation of her fin. Brignac says the rescue was complicated and crucial.
She had just given birth 2 days prior to a calf, and because she had entanglement on both of her pectoral flippers, she wasn't able to nurse the calf.
Cases like Stripes and her calf are not uncommon. Last year, there were 119 rescues statewide. Deaths reached a record 1,100 manatees in 2021. After a sharp drop, the numbers are once again on the rise.
According to Florida's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the number of manatee deaths has reached its highest level in the state in 3 years. 632 deaths were reported in 2025.
A colder winter, red tide bloom, and boating accidents are among the most significant causes of death.
We do ask the public to keep an eye out for manatees when they're out boating and report any manatee of concern to the FWC hotline.
I want to see her in the water.
Resident Sandy Bocage was here for the homecoming. She made the phone call when she saw Stripes in trouble last May.
I stayed 6 hours, watching them, and they were so good, watching them take care of her and get her in the truck. So yeah, it's full circle for me.
A new lease on life for Stripes and her calf, now named Argyle, thanks to rescuers looking out for these gentle giants. Christian Benavides, CBS News, Key Largo.
Well, you know him. He's been a staple on the screen since the 1950s, and he used to call Hollywood home. But did you know Kermit the Frog recently made the move to Atlanta? Brian Unger explains.
We're in a secret location.
It's an undisclosed location. We should say that we're not even allowed to say where we are.
Jewel Nash-Malul, museum director for Center for Puppetry Arts, is giving us the first look at this amphibious icon after his 2,000-mile cross-country journey to Atlanta.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Here he is. He's wrapped in a blanket.
Kermit the Frog's journey began atop a spire at what was first the century-old Chaplin Studio in Hollywood. When Muppets creator Jim Henson took over the studio in 2000, Kermit towered above the entrance, an enduring symbol of the Muppets' home.
I'm starting to see things that I recognize.
When the studio sold in 2024, the Henson family donated, or bought Kermit a one-way ticket, to Center for Puppetry Arts in Midtown.
And I can probably use his name now.
Oh my gosh.
Kermit the Frog, dressed as Charlie Chaplin.
All 900 pounds of him will soon be permanently installed atop the center, adding to Atlanta's skyline the world's most famous frog.
What's the timeline then for this Kermit?
Beth Chavo is the executive director.
He was a little beat up, so we want to make sure that he's cared for, and we conserve him and give him a little bit of a juju fresh up, and then mount him in the right place on our property, which is still yet to be determined.
So after a few spa treatments, the California sun can be very drying.
How does he look to you?
He actually looks like he's in pretty good shape.
What about his weight?
He weighs 900 pounds.
So he's a little heavy.
Yes.
Kermit will soon be ready for his Atlanta red carpet or green lily pad debut. Brian Unger, CBS News, Atlanta.
Coming up, we highlight a New York City food staple. Now, it's not bagels, it's not pizza, so any guesses? Plus, David Begnaud introduces us to a Pennsylvania teacher who started a chain reaction of kindness among her students.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gail King.
Hey!
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning. CBS Morning. CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount. See you at 7. CBS Mornings.
I want a mug. Yeah, good mug.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity, informality, and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on the takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7.
Money Watch is your no-nonsense guide to taking control of your finances, where I offer practical, real-world advice with no jargon and no judgment. I'm Jill Schlesinger. Listen to Money Watch wherever you get your podcasts.
One thing is very clear.
CBS Mornings is clearly fun.
Watching Rocky with Rocky.
Morning, good vibes.
Gail came in singing for me today.
CBS Morning.
Weekdays at 7.
You there?
Did you surrender? Did Donald Trump run you out of town?
Marjorie Taylor Greene returns to 60 Minutes after falling out with President Trump.
Politics isn't a game. When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives? Politics is about policy. So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like healthcare? I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. Do you know if there are active terror cells in the United States right now? To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
With her sister's murder long unsolved,
the months went by, the years went by, and then the decades went by.
Well, that's when I became a warrior.
a woman turns to TikTok pleading for leads.
Somebody knows something, and somebody knows who killed Molly Bish.
Can you help? 48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount+.
Does your hometown have a signature dish? I mean, you have the Philly cheesesteak, Baltimore crabs, and Cincinnati chili. Well, Renee Burleson recently traveled around New York City to learn more about a delicious and iconic staple.
Inside this tiny Brooklyn bodega, Jeremy Batista is perfecting one of New York City's most authentic dishes, the chopped cheese.
It's as simple as it comes. It's basically a cheeseburger chopped up. Right. You've got ground beef, lettuce, tomatoes, ketchup, mayo, and then you gotta add your seasoning. The bread is New York rolls, big fresh every day for us. And that's as simple as it gets. There's really nothing too complicated about it.
Rumored to have been created by New York City's corner stores in the early 90s as a cheap way to feed customers, the chopped cheese sandwich is a simple dish, but that is what can make it so complicated.
Despite its simplicity, there are several cultures that are influencing it that make it this uniquely American sandwich that comes out of the bodegas of East Harlem.
Tanya Hopkins is a food historian who spoke with me about the birthplace of the sandwich, which is believed to be Blue Sky Deli in New York City's East Harlem.
The ownership of the place is rooted in a Yemen family, I believe. There's something about it that is very linked to Arabic food, you know, chopping of meat and vegetables and bread. And there was a lot of cultural exchange happening on this grill. The folks from Yemen, the folks from the Dominican Republic, and this idea of these American ingredients.
Ooh, The mixture of simple ingredients catapulted the chopped cheese from the city streets to menu boards around the country.
There is this essence of like what the chopped cheese is and how it represents like the people here.
It's incredibly simple, but it's also incredibly delicious.
At Compton's Sandwich Shop in the East Village, the chopped cheese is one of their best sellers.
She's a beauty.
Alex Compton is the shop's founder.
How do you make a really good chopped cheese?
To make a really good chopped cheese, it's just about using really fresh ingredients, using the best bread you can get, never frozen beef, season it appropriately, cook it the right way, melt the cheese. The chopped cheese is just a New York staple. It's something that, you had after the bar, you could have during lunch, you could have it for breakfast if you wanted to.
At Brooklyn's Bodega City, Batista puts his own twists on the classic.
We have 8 different chopped cheese sandwiches.
8 different?
Yeah.
All right, off the top of your head, give me some of the more popular ones.
Most popular one is the Dominicano. It's a Dominican chopped cheese, comes with fried cheese, fried salami, ketchup, mayo, cabbage. We have a chicken chopped cheese, a barbecue chicken chopped cheese with bacon, onion rings. Got a good morning chopped cheese, comes with fried egg, hash browns.
It's born here of American ingredients, put together by hands that, came here from other places.
Yeah.
And
it came from New York.
It came from New York. It came from a bodega.
Yeah.
It came from brown and black food cultures, people coming together to recreate this thing.
Yeah.
That's uniquely American.
All right, coming up, how a dystopian novel is teaching high school kids the importance of giving back.
What do you hope your participation in the project signals to adults watching?
They're older than us and they should be more mature, but they're not doing as much as they could be doing.
Since you didn't know each other before the project started, does it give you some semblance of respect for the person because you know they're participating in this?
100%.
Yes.
To be a part of this community in this class that performed such a good thing for the world was just, it made her class a really welcoming space for me.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gail King.
Hey!
CBS
Mornings.
CBS Mornings.
CBS Mornings.
CBS Mornings.
CBS Mornings.
CBS Mornings. CBS Mornings. CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount. See you at 7. CBS Mornings.
I want a mug. Yeah, good mug. I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity and formality and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on the takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7.
Money Watch is your no-nonsense guide to taking control of your finances, where I offer practical, real-world advice with no jargon and no judgment. I'm Jill Schlesinger. Listen to Money Watch wherever you get your podcasts.
One thing is very clear.
CBS Mornings is clearly fun.
Watching Rocky with Rocky.
Morning, good vibes.
Gail came in singing for me today. CBS Mornings.
Weekdays at 7.
You there?
Did you surrender? Did Donald Trump run you out of town?
Marjorie Taylor Greene returns to 60 Minutes after falling out with President Trump.
Politics isn't a game. When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives? Politics is about policy. So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like healthcare. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. Do you know if there are active terror cells in the United States right now? To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
With her sister's murder long unsolved,
the months went by, the years went by, and then the decades went by.
Well, that's when I became a warrior.
a woman turns to TikTok pleading for leads.
Somebody knows something, and somebody knows who killed Molly Bish.
Can you help? 48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Bagno now introduces us to a teacher who's giving to her students so they can give back to others.
At Hatboro Horsham High School near Philadelphia, Christina Ulmer has two roles. She's the 9th grade English teacher, and she's the kindness lady.
How can our voices elicit social change?
In 2018, Miss Ulmer started the $20 Kindness Challenge.
Here we go.
Every semester, Miss Ulmer gives her students $20 each to put toward a good deed of his or her choice.
I made bracelets for every elementary schooler. Each of them are grouped by grade.
Students will often throw in some of their own money or pool their 20s with classmates.
For my $20 kindness challenge, I donated to a nonprofit called Glad Dogs Nation.
They each have to make a video about what they've learned.
We went to Walmart to get food, and we donated the food to St. John's Lutheran Church Food Pantry.
It made us feel like we had a bigger impact than just our budget.
Now we're gonna head to the nursing home. When we left the patient's room, we could overhear them talking about how nice it was and how much they liked the walker bags.
Here's the thing though. The very first stack of 20s that Miss Ulmer handed out actually belonged to someone else.
In 2014,